speaker today will be Steve Primo. Steve has been active in this industry for 35 years. He started out as a runner on the P-Coast, the Pacific Stock Exchange, in 1977, and there worked his way up to be a specialist for Donaldson, Lufkin, and Jenrette, a position which he held for 9 years. As a specialist, Steve was responsible for making markets in over 50 stocks. Steve left the floor in 1994 to focus on managing money and to teach his approach to trading. Since then, he has helped scores of students from beginner to advanced. Today, Steve teaches his strategies for stock, futures, and Forex trading through his website, specialisttrading.com and protraderstrategies.com. So our topics today are secrets of a stock exchange specialist and a specialist trading strategy that Steve is going to reveal later. Let's all please welcome Steve Primo.
Okay, can you hear me okay? Okay. All right. Bear with me. I want to thank you all for coming today. I guess I'll just put this in my pocket here. Thank you, Ron, for the introduction. Thanks, everyone, for taking time out of their Saturday to come hear a former specialist speak. My name is Stephen Primo. I am the president and founder of SpecialistTrading.com. And we are, first and foremost, an educational company. All right, even though we provide our members with signals and strategies, what we really want to do, our goal is to teach you how to trade. We feel that we are the premier online source for education and trading all the markets, not just stock market, forex markets, intraday trading, the E-minis, so lots of ways to trade and lots of ways to learn our information, to learn our strategies. Once again, thank you. I'm going to give you a lot of information today, so you want to get out a lot of notes and take some notes, because I'm going to give you some information that you can actually start using as early as Monday if you'd like. But just to give you, once again, a little bit more background about myself, I've been actively involved, as Ron said, in trading the markets for 35 years. I first started my trading career on the floor of the Pacific Stock Exchange. I was on the floor for 16 years, and 9 of those years I was a specialist. Now, even though I know some of you may be aware of what a specialist is, for those of you who aren't, because it's been a while since specialists had that big of a name in the industry, if you ever look at the pictures on the floor where there's paper all over the floor and people running around making hand signals, you have these large wooden booths. The people directly either in front or behind those booths were the specialists. And what they did was they made the markets, or they were in charge of anywhere from 35 to 75 stocks. And so if you wanted to buy or sell any of those issues or equities, you had to go to the person who specialized in those stocks. So that's the only reason why they call him a specialist. I didn't start out at the very top as a specialist. I had to work my way up. As Ron said, I started as a runner, as a reporter. And the job on the floor for that was you basically stood in front of the specialist post and waited for him to bark out some type of a trade, 1,000 XYZ at 5.5 or 5,000 IBM at 102.25. You would write it down on a piece of paper, run over to the teletype operator. She in turn would type it up and would go up across the ticker tape. As antiquated as that sounds, that was state of the art for 1977. That's the way things were done. I was a runner for about 6 months, and I gradually worked my way up as a floor broker's assistant, then as a specialist assistant, and ultimately I was hired to be a specialist. As a specialist, I traded through just about every market environment imaginable. Straight up markets, straight down markets, choppy markets, quiet markets, volatile markets. I even traded through the crash of '87, which I'll go into detail in a little bit, kind of share some stories there, some horror stories during that time. But I'll share a little bit about that. But I've seen and heard and traded just about everything and anything imaginable. If you can think of it, I've experienced it. I've traded solely off news. I've traded solely off indicators. I've traded Elliott Wave, Gann. I've even looked at some moon cycles. So I've just about gone through everything. In 1994, I decided to leave the floor and to pursue managing money and to trade my own account. And just to show you how backwards things were then, I hold the distinction of being one of the very first few people to leave the floor and to actually be a day trader from home. In 1993-94, there was no one really trading out of their homes because technology hadn't caught up with that yet. They just started to have some programs. The way I used to get my data was I connected a radio antenna to the back of my computer and hung the antenna outside my window. And that's how I got data. and I was trying to trade the large S&P contract at that time. And so I would only hope and pray that it didn't rain or it wasn't overcast that day, because I would go for literally hours without receiving any data. And I was trying to day trade stocks and the futures during that time. I was trading the large contract as well, the S&P. There was no E-mini at that time. And I think the margin was roughly $25,000 for one contract. During that time, if you wanted to enter an order, once again to show you how backwards it was, I had to make a phone call my broker, who in turn would call the person on the floor, who in turn would walk up in the pit or to the specialist post, then come back to me. And you tried to make a living this way. I really don't know how I survived, but that's the way things went for a while. But because of my knowledge and experience in trading this way, about 7 years ago, I was asked to be the director of education for a couple of online trading sites. And so for a few years, I taught and traded their systems and strategies. I've spoken all over the country at different expos and seminars. And about 2 or 3 years ago, I was persuaded to start my own website, where actually all I teach are the things that I've learned, as you see here, the insights, wisdom, and the trading strategies from the floor, things that turned my way of trading around. Because believe it or not, even though just went over my background and how long I've been trading, 35 years, and all the experience I've had and what I've seen, my first year as a specialist, my first year as a professional trader was almost disastrous. In fact, I didn't think I was going to survive. I struggled tremendously. My trading was basically 1 step forward, 2 steps back. I couldn't seem to get going, and I'm sure many of you have experienced that. I hope none of you are experiencing that right now. But it's very discouraging, because you really are putting in a lot of time and effort into trying to make some leeway, make some headway into the markets, and you just can't seem to go forward, to push forward. I would have tremendous months, followed by 1 or 2 disastrous trades where I literally gave everything back. So my P&L looked kind of like this roller coaster. I was riding high in April, shot down in May. I just couldn't seem to get going. It wasn't until a few elite traders on the floor befriended me. These were specialists as well, who were able to consistently generate gains, were able to consistently perform well in any market environment, that they changed my way of trading, and they turned my way of trading around. And the way they did it was by turning my way of thinking around, the way I've looked at the markets. It was more about, not about adding things to my plate, but more about stripping things away. So what I want to talk to you about today are the secrets of these stock exchanges and specialists. And I know you're probably thinking, boy, today Steve's going to give us some indicator that no one's ever heard of, or some system or strategy that only a few elite in some cave are using. No one ever knows. It's actually the opposite. Most of the things I teach and use personally myself are all things you've all heard of. They're probably things that you may be currently using, maybe you have used before in the past. But these are the things that actually have stood the test of time. These are the things that actually work. So nothing I'm really going to be sharing with you or showing, and even in my courses, not just in today's presentation, but my courses, are all things that have stood the test of time. I'm sure you're all aware of them. You all know them. It's more likely that you've just been taught incorrectly how to implement them. Perhaps you tried for one time and it didn't work, or worked for a little bit and then it didn't work, so you stopped using them. So the things that I'm going to be sharing with you, pretty much all of you in this room are aware of. It's almost like losing weight, trying to get in shape. Everyone knows that in order to lose weight, you just eat healthy and exercise, all right? But how many people are able to do that on a consistent basis? It's the same way with trading. In order to be consistent, you just have to apply the simple, basic things. But how many people actually do that with their trading, all right? So look back at your trading after we go through what I'm going to be sharing with you today, and see if you're applying these. And if you are, if you're applying them correctly. Now, before we begin, we're required to show you our disclaimer here. I'm going to show you a lot of performance results. Remember, we're going to share a lot of things that I currently use and our members at Specialist Trading use. But please remember that we can in no way guarantee that any of these results will be repeated in the future. And as you're taking a moment to view our disclaimer, we have a fairly, it's not that bad of a crowd here, about 30 people or so, 35 people. What I usually like to do, I've been presenting for quite some time now, I usually like to take questions at the very end of the presentation. But since we don't have a lot of people here, what I'm going to do is break the presentation up into sections. So at the conclusion of each section, about 10 or 15 minutes, I'll take questions, okay? This way, we don't break up the seminar and we kind of have fits and starts. So if you kindly just wait, if you have a question, just write it down, and when we get to the end of that particular section, we'll answer all the questions. Then when we get to the very end, we'll have a question and answer period, and then after I go into part 2, if you want to stick around, we can talk more. I'll meet you at the bar, whatever you want to do. I'll give you an email address as well as a phone number, or if you come up with a question once we've concluded, say tomorrow, you can always contact us and I'll answer any question you may have. Okay, so there's lots of ways to ask any questions. Just please wait till the very end of a particular section. All right, with that out of the way, let's begin. Now, I like to start my presentations with a little group interaction, but don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to hold hands or to hug each other or anything like that, or introduce yourself to the person next door. But what I want to do is, just for a second, if everyone could just take a round and look. We have a fairly nice-sized crowd here, 35, 40 people maybe. Just take a look at the room, all around it, and look at all the people we have here, sitting down. Okay? And imagine, if you will, for just a second, that we represent all of the traders on the planet, okay? Everyone in this room. We represent every single trader on the planet, okay? All right, now here's where the fun starts. Would everyone from this row back kindly stand up for just a second? Kindly stand up and please remain standing, okay? And you people as well, on this side as well. Thank you. Just stand up for a second. Remember, we represent the totality of traders on the planet. We represent every trader in the known world, okay? It's a fairly large group standing, okay? This group standing represents the percentage of traders who will ultimately fail, okay? Thank you. You can sit down now. All right, now with this row right here, just from here on, just stand for just a second. Much smaller group, only about 5 people, right? If we represent the totality of traders on the planet, this smaller group right here only represents the percentage of traders that will break even. Okay? Thank you. You can sit down. Ron, would you please stand up now? Give him a hand. This one person standing up, if we represent all the traders on the planet, represents the percentage of traders who will consistently generate gains. That's it. Give him a hand. He can sit down now. All right. Now, I make this point not to frighten you or not to dissuade you from trading, because if that were true, you'd all walk out right now. I mean, what would be the point of trading with such odds against you? But I say that to make a point to share the facts with you, because the facts are 80% of all traders will ultimately lose. And when I say lose, I do not mean you're going to go into some type of drawdown or slump. Literally mean you'll lose everything. Everything you set aside for your nest egg, for your trading, you will lose. Now, this does not mean that you can't come back later. You can't save some money and come back and trade again, but the odds are you'll lose that too, 80% of the chance where you'll give that all back, okay? So the facts are also that 15% of all traders will break even. And really, that's not that bad in today's market, because a lot of people like to trade as if it were a hobby. You know, you can have a hobby where you can go skiing or you can restore cars, and you know, that takes a lot of money, but you get a lot of enjoyment out of that. A lot of people trade that same way. They'll make some money one month, give it back the next, and over time they're basically breaking even, but it's a hobby. But most traders are not trading for a hobby. They're trading to generate some income, either some supplemental income or to sustain themselves. So if you're trying to do that and you're just breaking even, you're putting in a lot of work and you're not getting any results. That's only 15%. So what this means is that 5%, that one lone person standing, Ron standing, 5% of all traders are consistently profitable. That's it, where you're able to consistently generate gains. And I'm not saying you're going to hit home runs and become a millionaire or wealthy, but you'll be able to consistently generate gains. Now, if you want to see what that looks like on a different scale, here's a pie chart. If that represents all of the traders on the planet, that large section in red right here represents the percentage of traders who will ultimately fail. This blue little slice represents the percentage of traders that will break even, and this small little green sliver right here, not even a slice, but a sliver, represents the percentage of traders who will consistently generate gains. Now, I know a lot of traders don't have the same mindset as I do, but it's taken me 35 years of my career to come up with this. I know a lot of traders think that trading is a battle. For every winner, there's a loser, and you got to fight. You got to kind of battle against the market and go to war daily. I really don't look at the markets that way. The way I view the markets as a big pie in the sky. The markets are a huge pie in the sky, a never-ending source of gains, of profit. And there's enough there for the taking for anyone. The market is just asking you to come along with it. But unfortunately, not all of us are able to do that. In other words, if the market were some humongous ocean, a never-ending source of water, everyone has the same hours in the day, the same capability to go out and get some water. You can either go there with a glass and take a glass of water out, or you can go with a Big Mac truck and fill it full of water. It's up to you. But then you have to ask yourself, how is it possible that the majority of all traders and all trading profits are captured by such a small percentage. If it's just there for the taking, if anyone can take as much as they want, why is it that only a few are able to consistently capture it? Well, at specialist trading, we think it's simple. These traders have an edge. Now, everyone's searching for an edge. Everyone wants an edge. When I first started trading, I thought that an edge was something that you accumulated or something that you found or something that you added to your trading plan. That's what an edge was, either a system, a technique, an indicator. And what my mentors taught me was it's really not something you add, but an edge is not something that these few traders are doing that the majority of traders aren't doing. It's actually the opposite. These traders are not doing what the majority of traders are doing. That's really their edge, and that's really what's taken me this longer time trading through the arc of my career to figure out and what my mentors and my teachers taught me. It's not about what you do that's different from everybody else. It's what you're not doing that is different from everyone else. So everyone's searching for an edge. Everyone thinks they have an edge. I'm sure everyone here has a trading plan, a system, a strategy, a technique that you feel is your edge, that fits you and that works for you, okay? But what type of an edge? I mean, what type of an edge works? What type of an edge is consistent? So I want to share with you what most traders view as an edge. And this is what I used to view as an edge. In fact, my trading, when I first started as a specialist, my first year, was based off a lot of these very same topics and these very same things. Most traders view an edge as a tool that tells you the market is too low. I mean, that's a great edge, right? You see that we're tremendously oversold, something, the lights are ringing, and it's time to go long. You're going to buy at the very low, at the very bottom. Or the opposite. And a great edge is a tool that tells you the market is too high. Things are oversold, they're tremendously overbought. You're going to short, you're going to get out of your long and short at the very top. That's a great edge. Or you have a trading guru. I know a lot of traders like to subscribe or belong to a chat room or a trading room, and what they do is what we call piggybacking everything that the trading guru does. He goes and buys at the market or issues a signal, you buy. You do the same thing. You piggyback whatever his decision is. He sells, you sell. Follow your trading guru because he's never wrong. Or you're a technician, indicators. You have a bunch of indicators, maybe some you've constructed yourself or maybe something just a normal indicator, and whenever everything lines up, whenever all the lines cross, that's your edge to get in or to get out. Okay? How about fundamental news? Probably one of the most popular edges, what virtually everyone looks at is fundamental news, especially if you're trading stocks or if you're looking at economic conditions. You have to know what's going on in the world, what's going on with your earnings. Can't make a decision until the news comes out, and then your edge is being able to discern it, what it means, whether you should be going long or short off that news. And then finally, a lot of traders really rely on TV commentators. They have the TV on all day, or they wait at night to wait to hear what that certain guy is going to say about what he thinks about some stocks, or what he's touting, what you should invest in, what you should not invest in. So these are the main edges, what people view as what's going to put them ahead. And once again, I relied on all these myself. When I was first trading, these are all the things I focused on. The only problem is when you put too much emphasis on these things, when you put too much reliance on them, you turn them into a crutch. And when you turn anything into a crutch, you've basically given your power away, and it's pretty much the tail wagging the dog. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say we're going to follow fundamental news as our edge. This is what we make our decisions off of. This is where you have a strong edge. All right? In February of this last year, this came out, and this was almost a year ago, but this happens all the time. A news source said, this may be the week stocks fall back to earth. A rally on Wall Street will be put to test next week with the S&P 500 at its highest level since before the collapse of Lehman Brothers in 2008, 4 years ago. Okay? Both the swiftness and the magnitude of the gains have created concerns that the market is due for a pullback. So this is your edge here. You want to go along with the big boys. The news is saying that we're most likely going to have a pullback. This is your edge. You have a little bit advanced information about what the crowd is thinking. What's more likely or normal would be a 5 to 7% decline. So you don't want to buy anything in this decline, right? You may want to wait till the dust has settled and we've gone down low enough. In fact, you're even thinking about shorting. Maybe you want to short during this decline. Okay? So this came out on the 26th. Not even 2 days later, Wall Street's set to move higher. Stocks are set to climb Tuesday. European stocks are up 2% in morning trade, lifted by expectation that this week's liquidity injection by the European Central Bank will alleviate tensions in the banking sector. So maybe you would have had an idea you wanted to go long, but you stayed out because the news told you we were going to have a pullback. You see, when you rely on these things as a crutch, you're spinning your wheels, all right? You're like a pinball. You're going back and forth. you're like a leaf at the mercy of the wind. You're not in charge of your own trading. And you can do this with technical indicators. You can do it with a trading guru. The point is that when you put too much emphasis, overemphasis into these things, you turn it into the crutch, and really these things are really just turn into noise. They're distractions. What we were taught would make us successful are actually the things that stand in our way to becoming successful. When I was confronted by my mentors who taught me not to put so much emphasis on news, I said, why? And they said, because Steve, these things are really just nothing more than noise. They're distractions. See, that's not the thing you should be focusing on. The only thing you should be focusing on is the chart or the market in front of you. That's where you should be giving 80, 90% of your attention to, not these external things. And so I thought, well, if they're successful and they generate consistent gains, if I want to emulate their success, then why would I concern myself with these same distractions or with noise? So they weren't following or concerning themselves with these things, and neither should you. A funny story, I was on the floor, and I was sitting next to one of these specialists, and he was a specialist in IBM, and a trader came up to him and said, news and IBM earnings supposed to come out next week, right? And he says, yeah. And he says, do you have any idea what they're going to be? And the specialist said, no. He says, but you're the specialist. You should have an idea. And he goes, why? And because you make a market in those stocks. You trade them. He goes, I know. He says, well, wouldn't it help you if you had an idea or indication that the earnings were going to be good? It could help you with trading. Or but if they were bad, it could help you. He said, why? He said, if the earnings come out and it's good news for the stock will go up and I'll act accordingly. If the earnings come out, it's bad, the stock will go down and I'll act accordingly. In other words, it's comparable to walking down the street and you're with a buddy of yours and it starts to rain. And it's pouring rain and you're soaking wet. And your buddy starts telling you that it's raining. I know it's raining, I'm wet, I can see that. You know, what you want to do is act accordingly. Get out of the rain, get an umbrella. I don't need someone to tell me what's happening. I can see it right in front of me from my face. It's the same way with trading and relying too much on news, waiting for things to come out. You can see what's happening right in front of you. There's no reason to put that much emphasis. And that's what these mentors taught me, is that it's okay to keep them at bay, to only give so much attention to them, but this overemphasis on them will turn into distraction and noise and will keep you away from the very thing you're trying to pursue, which is consistency. All right, now let me tell you a little bit about what I learned on the floor about edges, because once again, I thought that these were the main edges. I thought I had an edge. News, indicators, subscribing to some trading gurus, I thought I had an edge. My mentors taught me that it's okay what you pick. It's all right if you want to view news. It's okay if you want to look at indicators. But they must have these components. So ask yourself if your edge has any of these components in them. First of all, an edge is something that sustains your trading. So what do we mean by sustaining your trading? As I said, I traded in the market 16 years on the floor. I saw virtually every type of market condition, from straight up, straight down, volatile to choppy markets. Okay? An edge should be able to sustain you in every type of market condition. I'm not saying it should outperform everything and give you 100% gains no matter what the market's doing. That's not what I'm saying. But it should be able to sustain you. You should be able to feel comfortable about your edge in any market condition. In fact, let's go back to 2007. Remember in 2007, the market had been going straight up for a while? Everyone was a trading genius. Everyone was a god. All you had to do was throw a dart at the Wall Street Journal and pick a stock. You made money. It was the easiest thing in the world to trade until 2008 came around. What happened to the edges? They stopped working. There were tons of day traders, tons of groups just like this. Ron and I were talking about that. Used to meet every week, hundreds of people. I was speaking at that time. There was capacity crowds. Everyone stopped trading. No one could afford to trade anymore. Everyone had lost everything, gone into that 80% group, given it all back. Not only that, but companies went under. Banks went under. It was just nothing was sustainable. So your edge, whatever you decide to choose as an edge, should sustain you in any market environment, whether it's choppy, whether it's straight up or straight down. Remember, I'm not saying 100 to 200% gains, but just something that should sustain you. Okay? Also, whatever you decide is your edge, it should have this component as well. It should be something you can rely on. When we say rely, we're talking about drawdowns. I don't care what you're trading, what system, what strategy, everything goes through a drawdown. Everything. In fact, we have a couple of current strategies at Specialist Trading. They're in current drawdowns. Not big ones, but they're in minor drawdowns. It's totally natural. It's totally natural. Everything in life goes through a drawdown. It's a slump. Whether it's your health, whether it's a relationship, a career, everything goes through some type of a slump in life. So it's totally normal, it's totally natural. When we say rely, what we're talking about is being able to rely and have faith in your strategy or system while it's in a current drawdown, knowing that it's going to come back because you've looked at it in the past, you've identified it with it, you've researched it. Imagine you are a sports buff and you have a favorite team, regardless of what it is, and it's mid-season and your team is in a slump. They're not doing very well. You've rooted for this team for years. Are you going to stop rooting for them and say, well, I'm going to start looking at another team now. I don't like these guys. You have faith in that team. You know that they'll eventually get out of this slump and go and make the playoffs. It's the same way with your strategy or system. You should have faith in it and know that even though it's not performing that well, it's going to come back. Okay? Now, we have ways to minimize the drawdowns at specialist trading, and we also have ways to keep you out of drawdowns altogether. So these help as well. But regardless of what you're using, you should be able to rely on your edge. And then lastly, the third most important component of a strategy or a system or an edge is that it must be consistent. Remember when I told you on the floor how my P&L looked like a roller coaster, straight up and down? Well, that's the opposite of consistency. Consistency is not about hitting home runs. Because I know of so many guys on the trading floor, and other traders as well, who hit tons of home runs. In a matter of weeks and months, they made hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And they are no longer trading anymore. So they're totally out of the game. So how good was it to have an edge that could make you tons of money, but then you give it all back? That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for consistency, and consistency is hitting singles. Now, we have a number of signals that were generated that hit home runs, and that's great. We'll take them when we can get them, but that's not our goal at specialist trading. That's not our motivation. We're not trying to go after these home runs. We're going after singles. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That way, over time, your P&L will have this nice, slow, upward slope as opposed to this up and down. So that's what we mean by consistency. When you look back over your P&L, does it have a nice upward slope? Hopefully it doesn't have a nice downward slope. But actually, that's just as bad as a roller coaster. That's the way I traded. Remember, once again, my first year I didn't think I was going to make it because that's the way my P&L looked. I would have 1 month where I thought, I finally got it back on track. I'm sure a lot of you have felt that. And then give it all back, right back to zero again. Even with all my experience and all my training, I was trading the exact same way as if I had just started a week before. So you must have an edge that sustains you, an edge that you can rely on, and an edge, most importantly, that is consistent. You have to put these into your strategy or your system or whatever trading plan you have to go back and look and see if these are already incorporated. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about my strategies. All of my strategies have these components and at the same time are designed to be as simple as possible. I know you've heard this before too. This is where we talk about all the things you've heard before. Everything I want to be sharing with you, I'm sure you've heard of before, but are you actually implementing it? When I first started trading, my trading plan was tremendously complicated. One of my teachers took me aside and said, Steve, it's the easiest thing in the world for a trader to overcomplicate his trading. It's the easiest thing in the world. Anyone can do that. Anyone can have 20 million indicators. Anyone can have 20 screens in front of them. Anyone can be following far too many markets. It doesn't matter. He basically said any damn fool can trade that way. It doesn't take much character and discipline to do that. What really takes character and discipline is to simplify your trading. It's to strip away the things that for some reason we were taught that we really need. When in actuality, they're just noise. So simplify your trading and you'll get on that road to consistency. You look at traders who've been trading 20, 30, 40 years. Most of them have maybe 5 rules tops. That's what's been able to sustain them. But when you look at traders who've been trading 1 year, 5 years, they have the most complicated trading plans. Those are the ones that are so convoluted, networks and all these things. I mean, there's no way you could ever explain it to anyone. Because they feel, for some reason, the more complicated, the more valid a strategy would be. It's been my experience that it's the exact opposite. The more simple you keep things, the more you'll get onto that road to success. Okay? So all my strategies have maybe 3 to 6 rules at tops, with very few indicators, very few things to follow. My strategies as well are consistent. You'll see over time that you have this nice upward slope. Sure, they go into drawdowns, but over a while, if you know how to perform, you'll be able to stay out of those drawdowns or keep them to a minimum. And then lastly, and most importantly, my strategies make you a part of the process. This, I think, is the most important thing. And people always say, well, what does that mean, make you a part of the process? You ever hear a trader who said, boy, I just signed up for this service. I took the first couple of signals and immediately got killed, okay? Or said, I've been following this new strategy. I paper traded for a while, looked great. The minute I jumped in, it didn't work anymore, okay? There are too many traders who take themselves out of the game. They take themselves totally out of the game and rely on something to make their decisions, someone or something to make their decisions for them. I'm sure many of you may be doing this yourself. Once again, following a guru or following some indicator or something where you totally rely on that to make your decisions. When you do this, you take yourself totally out of the game. You take yourself out of the process altogether. You're giving your power away, and there are just so many traders who do this, so many traders who love it. And I thought about it for a while. I figured, why do traders love to do this? And I realized the point is that when you take yourself out, you've given yourself an out. So if it doesn't work, if you fail, you always have an out. It's like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I followed him for a couple of weeks. Every signal was wrong. You always give see, it's never your fault. It's always someone else or something's fault. Or this strategy doesn't work. There's nothing good. The first thing I took, it was terrible. I was doing great up until the news came out, and then it killed me. It's always something else. You see, a specialist never becomes a victim. When you become a victim like that, you've given away your power, and specialists aren't victims. You take responsibility for every trade, and the way you do this is becoming part of the process. Therefore, when you're wrong, when the trade doesn't work out, there's no one to blame other than yourself. But when you're right, there's no one to congratulate other than yourself as well. So you have to make yourself a part of the process. We teach you how to do that. We give you all the tools and insights and things to make yourself a part of the process. Extremely, extremely important. Think of your trading right now. Are you relying too much on outside sources to generate your signals or what you should be doing? And how successful are you? How's it working for you? Let me just show you what it means to be part of the process, what it means to be out of the game. This was on July 13th this past year. Global economic optimism spurs strong rally. Dow jumps 204 points. That was the headline. Okay. Markets rallied strongly Friday as data in China allayed concerns about a further slowing in global growth, and banks advanced after JP Morgan released earnings. So that's good news, right? Good news. Concerns about China plus JP Morgan. Market goes up 204 points. All right, if you're relying on that, you'd say, okay, well, I guess the market's going to go up. I'm going to be bullish from now on. I'll just sit back and watch, see how it acts up. Maybe it's going to pull back a little bit. Well, when you're part of the process, when you're relying on what you know that works for you and what has stood the test of time, you don't have to worry about relying on outside sources, because many times you're a day late and a dollar short. This came out on the 13th. It was interesting because on the 12th, we issued all of our E-mini course members a signal to go long the market. Before that news came out about China, before the news came out about JP Morgan, we tell our members where to get long, where to exit, where to place your stop at the most standard generic point. Okay? Now, it wasn't as if the Prime Minister of China called me up the night before and said, hey, Steve, there's going to be some news about concerns about China. This will make the market rally, so you might want to tell your members to go long tomorrow. Or the CEO of JP Morgan didn't call me up and say, we have a good earnings report coming out tomorrow. Why don't you go long the market? We just saw it by viewing the market and our proprietary tools, our proprietary methods, and we issued a signal. Now, the members who have been studying our courses would have already seen this signal anyway, but we just generate the signal as backup. This was on the 12th. We told our members to go long. This is what happened the next day. A day late and a dollar short. Once again, the reason we saw this is because we were part of the process. We didn't wait for an outside source to give us confirmation to go ahead and do it. And then if you had held the strategy in its most standard form, you would have made nearly 37 points in the E-mini trading one contract for about $1,800. Okay? Now this is a home run. We're not always looking for the, most of the time we're hitting singles, but this is the way it happens, and this will happen every once in a while. Okay? Remember, if there's one thing I can stress in today, it's simplicity equals consistency. The secret to success is not about hitting those home runs and making millions of dollars. Excuse me. Most of the millionaires I know who traded on the floor are no longer trading. They're either been wiped out and their business is entirely different. Okay? There are good 200, 250 people on the floor there are no longer trading. There's only 2 or 3 of them, I think, in existence, and one of them is right here, sitting in the first row. So this is Pat. Pat was a specialist on the floor as well, a great trader. He's survived as well, but that's about it. So it's not about hitting home runs. If you want success, success is longevity, being able to trade 20, 30, 40 years down the road. being able to come back another day to trade. Not being part of the 80% group where you give everything away and that's it. You no longer have any money to trade. And the way to get that consistency is through simplicity. Keeping things as simple as possible. Another thing that I'm sure you're all firmly aware of. Remember, we're an educational company. Even though we generate signals, we're not just trying to force feed you with signals as if you're subscribing to some trading room. We don't really believe in trading rooms or chat rooms at Specialist Trading because we've seen in the past that traders turn them into a crutch, and that's totally against our philosophy. We're trying to make you a part of the process, and when you start relying too much on a trading room or a chat room, you start taking yourself out of the game. We want you to be a part of the process. Imagine if you wanted to learn how to play golf, you're going to be playing in a friendly tournament, and you hire me to be your coach. Well, I'll teach you and give you some tips on how to elevate your golf game, but I'm not going to play in the tournament for you. That's up to you. That's your responsibility. It's the same way with trading. I don't want you mirroring my trades. I'm not going to make money on every trade. I want you finding out how the strategies best suit your persona. Okay? So my goal is to teach you, not to trade for you, but to teach you how to trade with the Specialist Edge. All right, so that's the philosophy behind Specialist Trading. Just give you the background about it. Now, here's what we're going to learn today in the remaining portion of this first presentation. These are the different categories we're going to be speaking about. System versus strategy. I'm going to talk about what the difference is because I know a great many of you think that you know what the difference is or have your own definition, but I'm going to share with you what my definition is between those two entirely different ways of trading. Then I'm going to talk about concepts 1 and 2 at Specialist Trading. These are the foundation for everything we do at Specialist Trading. Concepts 1 and 2, and I'll share with you exactly what they are. Then I'm going to share with you our best edges, our most powerful edges at Specialist Trading, where we use in just about 99% of all of our strategies. Edge number 1, our buy-sell line, which is a tool to tell you which side of the market to be on. And edge number 2, which is our confirmation method, which is a tool designed to fine-tune your entry. Okay? And you can start applying these to your current strategy. These are not strategies, but these are the components that make up a strategy. So you can either build a strategy based off of these, or you can add them to your current trading plan. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about the number 1 chart pattern. This is, in my opinion, the only chart pattern you should really be focusing on. I know a lot of people like to trade with chart patterns. In my opinion, this is the most important chart pattern, and I'll show you examples of how you can implement it. In between each one of these sections, we'll take some questions in case you didn't understand something or wanted to review it. Then we'll take a break with a question and answer period right before that. And then the next section, we'll go into strategy number 1, where all of these come together and we put together one of our best trading strategies, strategy number 1. So I'll show you all the rules so that in its most basic form, you'll be able to start trading strategy 1 as soon as you'd like. I wouldn't recommend it though. I always recommend paper trading just so you get your feet wet, but you'll know the rules and you'll be able to see a lot of great examples, and we'll show you a lot of examples as well, okay? All right, so any questions before we start? Now that we've just kind of had an introduction to what I do, what my philosophy is, remember, you're going to see a lot of things that you've heard of before. There's going to be stuff where your eyes are not going to fly wide open and say, oh my gosh, I've never heard, this is amazing. Most of the stuff you've seen. But are you implementing it correctly? Most of the stuff people implement totally wrong or incorrectly. So I'm going to show you the correct way to use these. Okay, any questions? Yes?
Well, you said that you are employed as a specialist.
Yes.
Who is employer?
Well, Donaldson Lufkin was the employer they were a New York-based firm. They're one of the elite firms in New York, a brokerage firm. And what they did was they basically supplied you with the capital to trade. They bought the seat that you had to purchase, like a membership on the floor. They gave you roughly $1 million to trade with. At that time, we had 6-to-1 leverage, so we were able to trade during the day $6 million for the $1 million we had, and we just made markets and bettered the markets in those stocks that we were issued. And that's what we did. So it wasn't my actual capital, it wasn't my money, but anything I lost, I had to pay back. So it was they basically were trying to not carry any risk at all. So if you lost money, you had to pay it back, and if you made money, you got a nice percentage. So that's why I said my first year. This was even before I met Pat. My first year, I started trading. I didn't know what I was doing, and I had a very difficult time. And I didn't think I was going to be a specialist much longer. I didn't think I was going to have a career much longer. So I just want to stress that you can graduate from a business school. You can graduate from being a taxi driver. Doesn't matter. But the point is, you still need to use these things that I'm going to be teaching you. Because no matter how much education and how much experience you have, If you don't follow the rules, you immediately fall right back down to the bottom who's someone who's been trading for a week. It doesn't matter. And I know a lot of traders who made tons of money, they forgot about the rules, they started trying to pick tops and bottoms and lost it all.
Are, like nowadays, are things the same way they used to be? Like,
No.
socialism, or everything happens electronically?
Yes, there used to be a lot of what they were called regional exchanges, Pacific Stock Exchange, Chicago, the Boston, Philadelphia Exchange. They've all closed down. And these were specialists. Everything's pretty much gone electrically, and they just have New York, the New York Stock Exchange now. So it's completely different, but the same basic components that you use for success will work no matter what in any market. Any other questions before we begin? And once again, if you want to hear horror stories or afterwards, we can talk about that later. I really want to get into the educational part more so than just talk about the good old days. All right, why don't we start? Let's talk about the difference between a system and a strategy. I know most people have an idea of what they think they are. A lot of people think they're the same thing, but they are two entirely different ways of trading. I've traded systems, I've traded strategies, and they're vastly different, vastly different. They're related in a few aspects, but they're vastly different. First of all, let's talk about the highlights of a system, okay? I know many of you may be trading systems, maybe you've traded systems before. I've taught systems. The first most important thing is that systems are 100% mechanical, okay? What do we mean? It means that you do the same thing each and every time. Regardless if you have a buy signal or a sell signal, you follow the rules, no wavering. And this also means to the right here that there's zero discretion. There's no room for any doubt. There's no room for any type of input. It's zero discretion. You must follow the same mechanical rules. That's where you get the mechanized type of feel, almost like being a robot. In actuality, this can work in your favor because remember we talked about keeping the useless information, the noise at bay. Once you become like a robot and mechanical, you keep those things out. So that's actually very good. Because it's mechanical, you can research and backtest it. You can go back 5, 10, 20 years and see how well it performed. Okay, so this is a great tool to go back and see if this meets your standards or not. Now it's rule-based. Most systems have anywhere from 5 to 20 rules. Sometimes they can get complicated. But you have to follow these same rules. These are the rules and requirements that you have to follow in each and every setup. They have to be met. All these requirements have to be met. You can't have one kind of iffy and the other one that is valid. They all have to be met. Because they're rule-based and because you follow these rules, you can quantify the system, meaning that you can get statistics. You can see the win-loss ratio. You can see the percentage of winners, percentage of losers. Okay, you can see the worst-case drawdown. You can get stats by trading a system. And then lastly, there's an advantage. There's two different ways to trade a system. You can either trade it manually, meaning that if you're disciplined enough and you know all the rules and you know you're not going to waver and you can implement them yourself, you can virtually be in front of your computer and trade the system at all times. Or you can automate it. A lot of brokerage firms now allow you to automate your system, and it automatically, once the rules are met, a trade is automatically set. And the trade goes down to the floor to the pit and you buy or sell, just automatically. So these are the highlights and the main advantages and just the format of system trading. Okay? Let's look at the highlights and the differences of a strategy. Kind of overlap in some areas. Strategies are mechanical too, but guess what? They're only 70% mechanical, only 2/3% mechanical. So if you're only following like a robot 2/3 of the time, what's that other 30%? The other 30% is left for discretion. Now what do we mean by discretion? Because this is where my students usually have a tough time. They say, well, Steve, does this mean that if I woke up in a good mood, I can go long today? Or does this mean if the chat room I'm in, everybody doesn't like a stock, I can short it? That's my discretion, that's my hunch. No, discretion does not mean a hunch. It does not mean how you're feeling that day. Discretion is an educated choice, okay? It comes from experience. It comes from following your strategy over time, whether you're paper trading or actually trading it, where you get an idea, you get a feel for it. I was talking with Pat today. He has a really good feel on a certain strategy, okay? This all comes from his discretion. This is his educated insight, what he's gotten from trading that long. This is the type of discretion we're talking about. I'm not talking about Or you went out and you had a date with your girlfriend last night and you feel great and I'm going to buy everything today. That's not the discretion. We're talking about insight, market insight. Now strategies can be research. You can go back and see how well they've done in their most generic form, but you cannot backtest because of this discretion. Because of the 30%, you cannot go back and backtest it because you're not going to do the same thing each and every time. Now it's rule-based just like a system. There are rules that you have to follow, and usually strategies have less rules. They maybe have 5 rules or so, okay? But because it's rule-based, and because of that discretion, there are no statistics involved. We can't apply statistics when you have your insight involved, okay? I have a number of traders who will see a signal in the same setup in the E-mini, and both take the signal at the same place, and one comes out with a $1,000 gain, and the other one breaks even. It's all because of the discretion that they put in. You may want to be more conservative. You'll move your stop up tighter or move it to unchanged. Someone may want to let their profits run. And we teach you ways on how to add that to your strategies. Lastly, a strategy is manual trading only. You cannot automate it. Because of this discretion, you have to be a part of the process. You have to actually be in front of your computer going through all the rules to make sure that they're all filled and all the requirements are met. Now after looking at these two, I'm sure you can guess what we teach and trade at Specialist Trading. We teach and trade only strategies because they make you a part of the process. Now, the advantage of trading a strategy is you gain that specialist edge, that market insight, okay? Remember, this is your educational choice. This is your educational decision. It's not just a hunch. But once you use that market insight, what you're doing is you're becoming a part of the process, which we talked about. And what you're doing is your trading becomes more methodical than mechanical. We want to be more methodical than mechanical. Remember, we want to keep all the noise, all the distractions at bay. The problem with systems is that they do that. They do that very well. They keep away the useless noise at bay or to a minimum. But at the same time, they're keeping one of the most important things, your own inner insight, at bay as well. We don't want to do that. We want you to be part of the process. So strategies allow you to have your insight into that, okay? So that's the main difference. And everything I teach, everything I trade is a strategy. Therefore, unfortunately, I know a lot of you may say, well, what are the stats on this? Or what are the... We don't have stats. We don't have statistics. Because everything changes. Once again, we have 2 traders taking the same signal. One can make 500, one can break even, or vice versa. So it's all up to you how you become a part of the process. We're just trying to teach you how to be consistent. All right, any questions on those differences before we go on to the next section now, or 2 concepts? Any questions on the difference between a system and a strategy? Yes, sir. Yes, Phil.
Well, I just wanted to know how a trader was paid.
How what?
A trader is paid.
How a trigger is paid? You mean how you...
A trader, like if you got $1 million.
Oh, a trader
you
was
have
paid.
6 to 1 ratio.
Okay.
And you do well versus not doing well. How does that affect the pay?
Well, at the end of every month, you would just basically settle up. If you had a profit, you would get 40. Some traders got 50% of that. That's it. Very simple, yeah. But some months were better than others. Any other questions?
Just a comment.
Yes.
System versus strategy. I think almost everybody would rather trade a system.
Right.
It's like let her run and let the money flow back, or let the money come in.
Right.
I think strategy is probably harder to trade. I mean, you got to, like you say, put yourself into it. Most people like that system, assuming there is one or you have one that cranks out the money because you don't have to do anything.
Right.
Just let her run.
Yeah, if you didn't hear what he's saying, his comment was most people gravitate towards system trading. I know when I was on the floor, I was all about systems. I was just thinking, I just follow the rules, fill in the dots, and just money will come in. And I've traded systems, and I've taught systems. And Ron and I were talking about this last night. Systems are great until they don't work. And then they fail miserably. Every system I've ever traded goes into a drawdown, but much worse than a drawdown for a strategy. Because you have no idea. You can go back and research a system 10, 20 years and say the worst case scenario drawdown is right here. So we should never get to that point again, or if we do, we'll probably match it, maybe a little bit worse. Every system I've ever traded, I traded a lot of commodity systems as well, has far exceeded those drawdowns going back 10, 20 years and even more. And pretty much you're just blindly throwing money and you have no idea why you're doing it because you've kept yourself out of the process. And I really don't think, once again, trading should be like that. It's taken me years to realize that when you take yourself out of the game and you rely on something too much, once you go into a drawdown, you're going to join that 80% club. And my goal is to keep you out of that 80% club. And I've seen far too many systematic traders join because of that. Once again, it's all because you gave all of your power, all of your authority into something else other than yourself to make the decision. When they're working, they're fantastic. It's like, boy, I don't have to do anything. It's just turnkey. But when they stop working, they're miserable. I'm sure some of you have had that experience. So it wasn't until I started becoming myself and teaching people to become part of the process that their trading turned around. Okay? The reason why I think people gravitate towards systematic trading is because it's so simple, it's so easy, you really have nothing to do. And while it's working, it generates some really nice numbers. But remember, the brighter the sunshine, darker the shadow. You can lose just as much. All right, so I would much rather be more about hitting singles and having this nice upward slope. The secret to success, I found out, is not about how much money you make. It's not. It's about how long you can trade. Success equals longevity. Okay? All right, let's go on to concept number 1. This is the foundation, the building blocks of everything we teach as specialist trading. Concepts number 1 and number 2. Once again, it's not going to be earth-shattering. It's everything you've probably heard of 1,000,001 times before. But concept number 1 is always trade with the trend. Nothing new, right? But how many people do it? I'm sure a lot of people have started trying to trade with a trend and then it doesn't work or they miss a lot of trades, so they say, forget it, this doesn't work. And one of the main reasons is because for some reason traders always want to sell at the high and buy at the bottom. I know I did. I was always trying to pick tops and pick bottoms. And that'll work 9 times out of 10, but on the 10th time it doesn't work, you give everything back. It's much more conducive, you have much better sleeping nights if you trade with the trend. Okay, the problem with people have is that, what is the trend? One trader's uptrend would be another trader's downtrend. This is what people have trouble with trading with the trend. There's 1,000,001 ways to discern what trend is. So we're going to show you 3 of the simplest tools and techniques we have for determining trend that you can apply to a strategy or system you already have. These are the tools we use: the Daunting channels, the Bollinger Bands, and the RSI. Okay, you can find these in virtually any charting software package. They're very common indicators, and we're going to just slightly edit them a little bit. But these are our main sources for determining trend, okay, short-term to long-term. Daunting channels, Bollinger Bands, and RSI. Let's take each one individually. Let's look at the Daunting channels. Now what we want to do is set the Daunting channels to a 21-period default. Okay, whenever you find the Daunting channel indicator, go into the edit box and just make sure it's set, the length is 21. That's the standard length. We have ways to decrease it or increase it depending on the market conditions, but that's for course members. The standard default should be 21, period. Okay? And the channels are 3 channels. They're top, median, and bottom channel, and they all have the same kind of stair-step look. What we want to see is that all channels must be headed in the same direction in order for a trend to be in place. That's it. If all channels are headed in the same direction, whether they're going up or whether they're going down, that's your trend. Doesn't get any simpler than that. Okay, so here's what they look like. I'm going to get my mouse here so you can see the uptrend. We have the 3 channels, as you can see: top, middle, and bottom. This entire way, you could have outguessed and said, hey, we're going to top out here, but as long as the Daunting channels are still headed in this nice stair-step approach, we're still in an uptrend. So you're not going to try and pick a top, you're not going to try and short it, you're going to stay with the trend. Now, a lot of people have difficulty at these certain points where we go sideways. They say, Steve, what does it mean when this is going sideways and this is ascending? Just remember that sideways is another way of a pause. It doesn't mean that they're going down. It just means that you've paused from going higher. So the direction is still up. It's just a pause in an upward direction. All right, that's an uptrend. Conversely, you can have a downtrend. When all 3 Daunting channels are headed in the same downward stair-step direction, we have a downtrend in place. Simple enough. No reason to try and pick tops and bottoms. Just go with the trend. Those are the Daunting channels. Now the Bollinger Bands, another common tool. I'm sure all of you have used the Bollinger Bands. We use them slightly differently. What we want to do is make sure the length is set at 20. I believe that's the standard default setting for Bollinger Bands. But we want to change and slightly edit the upper and lower deviations of the upper and lower bands. I don't know if all of you have the capability to do this on your charting software, but if you don't, call your tech support. They may give you the capability. All we want to do is change the upper band deviation to plus 0.382 and the lower band to negative 0.382. So what exactly does this mean? It just means that that's the distance we're going to be either above or below the median band or the moving average. Okay? And just like the Dodging channels, we want to see that all bands are headed in the same direction. Okay, that's it. It's just that simple. Now the Dodging channels, excuse me, are more, they're more of a stair-step approach. The bands are going to be a lot smoother. So let me show you what I mean here. As you can see, we're in a nice uptrend. Why? Because all three smooth Bollinger Bands are headed upwards. At this point, the market starts to waver, starts to get choppy back and forth, as exemplified with the Bollinger Bands. We're kind of going sideways to fits and starts, but it's at this point where we start to have a clear-cut downtrend in place. So once again, we want to see them all just in sync, all in smooth sync. You can use this on a 5-minute chart, a monthly chart, doesn't matter. Forex market, just a second, we'll get to the very end of the section. And then lastly, the RSI. Most people love this tool, this indicator. It's a great tool. Unfortunately, we think that 99.9% of the population uses it incorrectly. Most people like to use it as an overbought, oversold indicator. And I'm sure you've found out over the years that there's no such thing as overbought and oversold. Something going up can go up as high as it wants. It can go down as low as it wants. We've seen things, equities go down to zero. So we're not interested in picking tops or bottoms. Therefore, we don't care about an overbought, oversold indicator. Here's what we want to do. We want to change the setting to a 5-period RSI. I know a lot of people like to use a 2-period or 3-period. We found that the best bang for your buck is a 5-period RSI. Okay? So I believe the default is 14. Change it to 5. And we want to get rid of the overbought, oversold lines, 30 and 70. Get rid of those. Either you can white them out or just don't pay any attention to them. But we want the median line, which is 50. So plot the median line, which would be at 50. Now, if you have 5 consecutive RSI bars that close above the median line, you have an uptrend in place. Okay? And as long as you stay above that median line, your uptrend is still in place. If you have 5 consecutive RSI bars below the 50 median line, you have a downtrend in place. And as long as you stay below and don't back cross up above the 50, you're now in a downtrend. Simple enough? All right, here we have a chart. Here is the RSI in blue, the 5-period. Here is the 50 median line right here. We kind of waver above and then below, but at this point we have 5 consecutive closes above the 50 line, as exemplified right here in these bars. After that happens, you see we have a nice uptrend take place. As long as this RSI stays above the 50, you're in an uptrend. But you have to have a minimum of 5 bars above, okay? Same thing on the downside. We kind of bounce up and below, but now we have 5 consecutive RSI bars below 50, and they correspond with these bars right here. As long as you stay below 50, you have a downtrend in place. All right, so let's review here. We can take any questions, but this is what you need. For Dodging channels, all 3 channels must be headed in the same direction. You want to set that to 21 period. Bollinger Bands, all 3 bands must be headed in the same direction, okay? You're just going to alter the standard deviation plus 0.382, negative 0.382. And then lastly, the RSI. You're going to change it to a 5-period. And if we're above that 50 median line, you're in an uptrend. If we're below, you're in a downtrend. Now, you had a question back there, sir?
Yeah, can you describe how you come up with 0.382 minus?
Yeah, I know a lot of people think there's something mystical, Fibonacci about that, but it was just something that was I've been using for years. It just seemed to be an easier way to remember for a lot of my students if I made it a Fibonacci number. It doesn't have to be exact number, but those numbers just kind of, they're a Fibonacci number and they just kind of fit and they have a nice smoothness to it. I'm sure you could be 1 or 2 digits off, it would still be okay, but there's nothing magical about that. Yes?
When do you decide which one of these you want to
Very good question. A lot of students get confused. They go, I thought this was supposed to be simple. You give me 3 tools here. Which one am I supposed to use? We show you in the courses where to apply different strategies, use these different tools as their trend filter. So we show you in the courses certain strategies. The certain strategy I'll be teaching you today, for example, uses the Donchian channels. All right? And when you only want to be using one and not overlapping, making it too complicated. We have other strategies that are a great strategy for the Forex markets, which incorporates the RSI. And that's it. No other trend indicators. So we tell you which ones to use, which ones not to use. But once again, let's say you have a plan already that's maybe based off of news, maybe it's based off technical indicators. You can also apply this to help you to elevate your trading plan. Okay? Yes, sir.
Concerning time change,
Time frames?
time frame.
Yeah.
Do each one of these correspond to a different time frame, or can they all be used within the same or different time frame?
I probably get this same question asked every week by new members, and it's perfectly valid because I used to use this myself. The question is, do they just work with one, or should you apply it to different time frames? In other words, to validate the lower time frame, in other words. I know a number of traders and students at Special Trading who trust that way of trading, where they must see that the trend on a higher time frame is validated by the lower, and vice versa. Personally, I have found no consistency in it. It does not in any way make your trading worse, but it just, to me, it cancels me out of a lot of trades because it filters a lot of trades where aren't in sync. So the way I trade personally, I just take each individual chart for what it is. I don't worry about what the higher time frame is. If I'm looking at a 5-minute bar in the E-mini and prices below the Bollinger Bands, as we saw, I'll show you an example on a pullback. If prices below the Bollinger Bands, but say on an hourly or a daily price is above, I'm not going to concern myself with that. I only look at the chart I'm trading. This is just the way I trade. I've had success with that. I know a number of students who swear by saying, no, Steve, you get higher percentage results if you, and that's fine. As long as you're not deviating from the rules and bringing in some indicator no one's ever heard of or some plan that is not even part of the formation of specialist trading, that's fine if you want to use that. You want to use a higher time frame to discern the lower one. I hope, is that the question you were answering? I hope, okay. Yes, sir.
Since you mentioned time frames, did you try to use it on different like volume charts, tick charts, or just
It works in tick charts. The question is what type of time frames and what type of charts. It works in tick charts. I tried to apply it to range bars and to volume bars. Not much success because of just the way they're constructed. It works the best in just normal average bars, candlesticks, tick charts. It works tremendous in tick charts, especially like, for example, when you get a really volatile or really tremendous trend as we had yesterday when markets were going straight down. It was phenomenal. You can go back and test it today and see how, after the presentation, go to your charts and see how well it will work, especially the RSI. Any other questions before we go on to concept number 2? Yes, sir.
Yeah, on your RSI, it looked like there were a couple of bars there before you started your count. What was that?
Let's go back to the chart here real quick. Right here.
At the top, you go above the 50% line, but you laid out, it's like 4
Yeah.
bars before you started the count.
Right. You want to have 5 bars, okay? The minute you have 5 bars,
After the cross.
right, after the crossover, that says a trend is in place. Well, we had about maybe 5, maybe 4 here, but then we crossed below, so then it's no longer valid. See? You want to have 5. Let's say we had 20. The minute we cross below, the uptrend is no longer valid, and now we want to see if there's 5 below the median line, because that will make us in a downtrend. Okay? Any other questions before we go on to... Remember, these are not strategies. These are just trend tools, trend filters, way to determine the trend. Remember, the concept number 1 is to trade with the trend. It's the most important thing. But people have trouble in finding out what the trend is. People say, well, should I look at a higher time frame? Should I look at a lower? How do I, I was always taught that this was your trend. We use these as the most simple but most powerful ways to determine trend when trading. Doesn't matter if you trade stocks, futures, forex, doesn't matter if you're an intraday trader or an investor. Okay? You'll see these in any time frame, in any direction. Okay, so those are the 3 tools. Now, concept number 2. Now that we've found out what the trend is and how to find the trend, regardless of time frame, regardless of market, How are we going to trade? How are we going to enter? Or what are we looking for as some type of a zone for some type of fertile ground to get into the trade? Well, concept number 2, always trade pullbacks within the trend. Once again, I'm sure you've all heard of this before. You've all said, okay, there's nothing new here, pullbacks. It's true, but we want to trade in sync with the trend, and the best way I know how is not by picking tops or bottoms, but by entering on pullbacks. The trouble is, once again, people don't have a clear idea where the pullback is. I know I myself struggled for years trying to figure out, well, how do I know when a pullback has started or the trend has changed? It's difficult sometimes. So let's look and see what a definition of a pullback is first, so that for those of you who aren't familiar with a pullback, say you have an uptrend in place. What you're looking for is a sell-off or a dip in price that has reached a specific level to go long. That's all you're looking for. And if you're in a downtrend, the way we just showed you, we're looking for a rally or a blip in price that has reached a specific level to go short. That's it. That's all we're looking for at this point. We still haven't gotten to the trigger yet or the entry, but we're just looking for this environment of a pullback. Now these are examples of pullbacks. Obviously we're in an uptrend. This is a moderate pullback where the sell-off is moderately down. We have a shallow pullback where it's basically another term for a high-level consolidation. And then we have a deep pullback where it's a deep sell-off. Okay, so different ways to have pullbacks that works just the same way going to the downside as well. These are the types of scenarios we're going to be looking to enter. We're not going to be looking when we feel the market is too low and try to pick a bottom. Because this will work. This would have worked here, would have worked here, but one more time we would have tried it. Guess what would have happened? We would have gotten killed. We would have given everything back because we tried to pick a bottom. So it's much more advantageous to go with the flow as opposed to try and pick a top and bottom. So we're trying to trade pullbacks as opposed to pick tops and bottom. All right, so let's see some examples of how you can spot a pullback with the Donchian channels. Remember, those are 3 channels that are going in the same direction. Okay? So what we're looking for is we're looking for price. Remember, if we're in an uptrend, we're looking for price to sell off, and once we come into the range of that midline, this is a pullback area. That's how we determine what a pullback is using the Donchians. As you can see here, this is not a pullback, but once we sell off and come down to the midline, that's the pullback area. It works the same way if you're going up or if you're going down. We have a very clear downtrend in place. Once we bounce and rally and touch and come into contact with this midline area, that means we're in a pullback. We still don't know where to get in. We still don't have any idea yet, but this is the fertile area where we want to get into the trade. Every time we touch or get near that, we go back down as long as we're in the trend. How about the Bollinger Bands? Well, it's a little bit different with the Bollinger Bands because they're so smooth and they're a different type of tool. Most of the time when you're in an uptrend, price is above the 3 Bollinger Bands. So what we want to see is price come down and touch any of the 3 Bollinger Bands. That's a sign that we're in some type of pullback range. As you can see here, we're in an uptrend. Price is usually above these 3 Bollinger Bands in an uptrend, but once we come down and touch anywhere of these 3, we're in some type of a pullback area. Come down and touch, we're in a pullback area. Now here we came down and touched, but we could see that we're out of sync. Some are going up, some are going down, so it's really not valid. Once we get in sync where we're all going in the same direction, now we want to bounce and touch. Those are how we find out where the pullback is. And then lastly, it's a little bit different using the RSI. It's not as cut and dry, but it's still a great tool for determining trend. As long as you have a trend with that 5-period RSI tool, if you're in an uptrend, if you have a sell-off and the RSI remains above that 50 median line, you're in a pullback zone. If you're in a downtrend and then you have a little blip in price, a little rally, but the RSI still remains below, you're in a pullback phase. Let me show you what I mean here, make a little more sense. The RSI, by being above the 50 median line, is clearly in an uptrend, but we have this little sell-off right here. This is your pullback. As long as you have a sell-off, even how small it can be, and we're still above, that's a pullback. And if you have a downtrend in place, as long as you have these little blips in price, these little rallies, and you never go above the 50 median line, that's a pullback. So all 3 of these tools can show you the trend direction, either direction, and they can show you pullback zones. Okay, so let's review. Always trade with the trend. You can use the Donchian channels, Bollinger Bands, 5-period RSI. Concept number 2, always trade pullbacks within the trend. I remember it was explained to me this way, and this is the way it made more sense, because I had always heard on the floor, trade with the trend, trade pullbacks. So what? I'm going to pick a top or a bottom. That's the way I wanted to trade. It was more exciting, more dramatic. Until I started to lose a lot of money, then it got to be real serious. But I was explaining, one time my mentor said, Steve, imagine you're swimming in a river, okay? Would you rather swim with the current at your back, or would you rather swim upstream? I said, naturally, I want to swim with the current at my back. Because, right, trade with the trend. Rule number 1. All right, now you've gotten outside the river, you want to sunbathe for a while, then you want to dive back in. So you climb some rocks and you want to dive back into the river again to go swimming. But this is full of people. There's tons of people in the river. Would you rather dive in when the river is empty or when it's full of people? You might hit someone and injure yourself. So naturally, I want to dive in when there's no one in there. Great. Trade on pullbacks. If you're in an uptrend and it starts to sell off, all the buyers have left the water. They're all out of the pool. That's when you jump in. If you're in a downtrend and the price starts to rally, all the sellers have left the water. They're out of the pool and the buyers are in. That's when you jump in. So buy pullbacks and sell pullbacks, trade with a trend, and enter with pullbacks. Any questions on concepts 1 and 2 before we go on to, I think, the 2 most powerful edges we have at specialist trading? Yes, sir.
How often do you see the market being in trend?
The question was, how often do I see the market being in a trend? It depends on which market. It depends on which time frame. If you're intraday trading, you can see maybe 2, 3 good trends depending on your intraday time frame. Believe it or not, the E-mini S&P or the S&P on a daily basis is one, I think, statistically the worst trending things if you look on a daily basis. But we have ways to get around that. That's why we get fewer signals. Maybe we only get maybe a couple signals a month. So it all depends. In other words, the answer is it all depends what you're trading. The only thing I can answer is the best trending markets around, in my opinion, are the Forex markets. Because there's so much capital behind them. When they go in one direction, they're like a freight train. I mean, they just keep on going, either up or down. So I can only say that these work exceptionally well with Forex markets because there's so much money. I think if you combined all the U.S. markets, commodities, and stock markets and futures together, they wouldn't compare to the capital or the money exchanged daily in the Forex markets. So it all really depends. I'm sorry, that's the answer. Yes, sir.
Once you identify a trend and you're looking for a pullback,
Yes. Concept 1 and 2.
do you think there's an advantage like trying to take a first pullback and don't take like third pullback, or you just take every pullback in that trend?
Well, the question was, is there an advantage to taking the first pullback and then taking the second pullback?
Because
Right. Many times,
ends at certain points, so the more pullbacks you have, the less chance you might have that you're getting less reward potential.
Right.
Running more risk that you want to run into.
right, many times what he's saying is that if you continue to see more and more pullbacks, basically it's not just a pullback anymore. What you're turning into is another trend. It's a downtrend. We have ways to show you. This is where we talk about becoming part of the process. People always say, well, Steve, I've only been trading for 2 months. How can I become a part of the process? I don't know. This is what my 35 years of experience is. I can't really share all of it because those are the proprietary things we share in the courses. But we show you ways how to really trade conservatively and how to trade aggressively. I can share one with you later on today, which when we go to a concept, I'll answer that question for you. But when we go to one of our first edges, and I'll show you which pullback you should be taking, okay? But it'll make more sense when I get to that section. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
What's your experience with breakouts as pullbacks?
My experience with breakouts is that they, most of the time, are fake outs. The question was, do breakouts work? I think what most traders like to do is fade breakouts. Many times breakouts will work, say a breakout to the downside, or breakdown. But what will happen is they'll break down, they'll get everyone in because it looks like that was big support. Once they break, everyone shorts it or everyone gets out, and then they'll bounce back up. That bounce back up is the pullback. That's where you want to get in. So rather than get in on that initial breakout or that break up to the upside, a lot of times they'll go up and stop and everyone exits out, that's where you should be getting in, on that sell-off or that pullback. And once again, we're back to the old concept, only buy on pullbacks. I'm going to share with you an entry technique which is similar to a breakup but on a much smaller scale. Any other questions before we go on to the next section? Okay. I want to ask you, has this ever happened? And you don't have to answer, but just keep it to yourself, but I'm sure this will look familiar to a lot of people. It doesn't matter if you trade the E-mini, if you're a stock trader or forex trader. I'm sure this looks very familiar. Here's a 5-minute chart of the E-mini this last month. Okay? As we can see here, on this 5-minute chart, we opened up the day unchanged, but then proceeded to sell off. Pretty sharp sell-off in the first hour and a half of the day. Okay? At this point, we look like we're stabilizing. Having a little support right there. Maybe the chat room or the trading room you're in, everyone has said, you got to buy here. This is support. So-and-so says if I put all my Fibonacci numbers together, this is where we should stop. Someone else says there's news coming out, it's going to be really good. The market's just stabilizing before it goes up. So you jump in, and this is where you decide to buy. Okay? Looks good. It's sold off. You're buying, at a lower price. And the minute you get in, guess what happens? Look familiar? Okay? I'm sure, hey, I know firsthand. This is the way I used to trade, and this has happened to me before. Okay? It's almost like the market was just waiting for you to get in, right? Or how about this example, AEP. This is from going back to June, July, and August. Okay, so let's say you're long AEP. You've got a nice profit. Say you got a 5 or 6 point gain in this, but it looks like it's topping out. In fact, you've had 2 lower closes. A lot of the blogs you subscribe to are saying you've got to get out. There's a lot of sellers. There's going to be bad news coming out in the company. In fact, this thing is probably going to really go down and make new lows. You start to get scared, so you say, well, I don't want to just get out right now and follow the herd, but if we break this support right here, I'm getting out. I'll take my small gain and get out. So the very next day, lo and behold, we close even down lower. So you said, that's it, I've had enough. I've given back almost half of what I made. I'm getting out. And if you're a more aggressive trader, you may even want to say, you know what, these guys have really convinced me. I'm going to short this now. So you jump in and short, and guess what? You look familiar. Like I said, it's almost like the trading gods were waiting for you to get in before they could say, okay, back up the truck, let's go the opposite direction. What if there were a tool or some type of an indicator that could have, not guarantee, but have a high probability for success for getting you on the right side? So that instead of selling or buying, you could be buying when you're supposed to be buying and selling when you're supposed to be selling. Well, at Specialist Trading there is. This is our number one tool, our number one edge. It's the most powerful tool we have at Specialist Trading. And everything, virtually everything we trade off of, everything foundation is used with this. This is our buy-sell line. This tool is extremely powerful but extremely simple. In fact, if I were only given one tool for the remainder of my trading career to trade with, this would be the one I would choose. If you stripped away all of the knowledge I had in 35 years and said you can only use one thing, this is what I would use. That's how powerful it is, and that's how much I rely and depend on it. It has literally saved me thousands, if not tens of thousands, and made me thousands of dollars in the past because of just using this simple technique. Okay? And all it is the 50-period simple moving average. That's all it is. I want all of you, when you go home today, no matter what you trade, no matter what market, no matter what time frame, to plot a 50-period simple moving average. That's it. And I want you to plot it on every one of your charts and ask yourself, where is price in relation to the buy-sell line, 50-period simple moving average? Okay? I'm going to say that again. Where is price in relation to the buy-sell line? I don't care what strategy you're trading, if it's based off news, if it's based off the full moon, I don't really care. Before you get a signal, I should say, before you pull the trigger on a signal that your strategy or system has generated, ask yourself, where is price? And you'll only come up with 2 possible answers, because if price is above, then you're only going to be looking to take long signals. That's as simple as it is. And if price is below, you should only be taking short signals. You will never take a buy signal if you're below the buy-sell line, and vice versa. Now, it doesn't work 100% of the time. I know a bunch of you are going to go back and say, this doesn't work. I found a number of examples where it's the opposite. But I guarantee you it's a numbers game. Over time, if you use this simple tool, you're going to see that you're that much ahead of the game and you're on that road to consistency. Let's go back to these examples again. Remember, we originally wanted to buy because we thought we had some little stabilization right here, and we jump in, straight down. Now what if we applied the buy-sell line? So we apply the 50-period simple moving average, and we ask ourselves, where is price in relation to the buy-sell line? Obviously, it was below. So we had no business in the world even considering going long the E-mini. I don't care what trading room, what chat room, what blog, what news source was telling you to go long. Don't take the trade. In time, this will work in your favor. How about AEP? We originally wanted to go short or exit our position, but it went the exact opposite direction. But we applied the buy-sell line, and we ask ourselves, where is price in relation to the buy-sell line before we pulled the trigger to go short? And we were above. As long as we were above, there's no reason in the world, no matter who or what is telling you, to go short. Okay? Hold on, I'll get to your questions at the very end. It may be answered in the very next slide. Now, I know a lot of you are saying this may have been your question. Well, how important, Steve? This is nothing earth-shattering. This is nothing new. In fact, we've had educators come in here before that talk about the same concept, but they talk about the 200-day moving average, or maybe even the 20-period moving average. What's so great about this? You know, it doesn't seem that complicated. I've used this before. It doesn't seem to work. Okay. Well, one of the ways in which we determine the authenticity or how valid a tool or technique is at specialist trading is how well it works in different time frames, in different markets, and in different directions. So let's go back, and let's go back to 2008. We all remember what a terrible market that was at the beginning of 2008, right? That's where everyone said just ceased to work. That's where the market fell out of bed. A lot of traders joined the 80% club, gave away everything they had. Businesses went out. They went out of businesses. Whole companies just were destroyed. Sectors were just disintegrated. It was terrible. It was a terrible part in the beginning of the recession. What if there were a tool or some type of indicator, something that could have, at the very least, kept you on the sidelines, so that you didn't get hurt? Maybe you didn't make any money, but at least you didn't get hurt and were able to hold on to some money or capital that you had. Well, if we look at this weekly chart of the E-mini, which represents the S&P 500, as early as December 2007, January 2008, we had consecutive closes below the buy-sell line. At this point, the market, what was the market telling you? It was saying there's no way, if you're an investor looking at a weekly chart, that you should be in this market. And you had a number of choices. You could either, if you were long, you could either liquidate everything you had, be kind of drastic, but you could have if you wanted to. Or you could have taken some of the profits off the table, because 2007 we had gone straight up. You must have had some nice profits. Or you could have moved your stops, tightened your stops. Or let's say you were thinking about going long. Let's say you had some great buy signals. You were excited. But after you saw this, you said, you know what? I think I'll wait on the sidelines till we get back above before I go long anything. And lastly, if you're an aggressive trader, you could have said, oh, hot dog, I'm going to go short. There's some great shorting opportunities here. And I could just look here, I'll face value, and see there were a number of sell signals I could have taken advantage of, which we did. Okay? So you see how this could have helped you in 2008. Save a lot of money, a lot of people's IRAs would have still been intact, a lot of trading capital would have still been there. Now, I'm sure you say, well, Steve, that's great for investors. I'm a day trader. I don't trade that. I trade 5-minute charts, 10-minute charts, tick charts. How well is this going to work for me? You know, this is kind of slower time frame. Okay, let's fast forward about 2 years. Remember a little thing called the flash crash? I can't tell you how many traders called me up a day or two after that and said, Steve, I know you're all about your methodologies and your strategies, but there's no way anything would have helped a small trader like myself, small $10,000, $15,000 account, day trading the E-mini or stocks on that day. There's no way. I mean, the markets are manipulated by these high-frequency trading. You know, there's no way these programs, any way I can get in the way of these programs and make any money. Okay, well, let's look at a 5-minute chart of the E-mini on the flash crash. And we ask ourselves, where was price in relation to the buy-sell line? Well, 99.9% of the day we were below. Now, I personally had one of my best day trading days during this day. I don't know, if you were following this simple rule, I don't know how you could have lost money, because every signal you would have gotten would have been a short signal. And if you couldn't have made money going short during the flash crash, you're doing something wrong. The only way you could have lost money, in my opinion, was by trying to pick a bottom. We don't do that. So this simple rule would have kept you out of being long, and you would have had a great day. I know some of our members had some of their best days during the flash crash, some of our E-mini intraday traders. And you could apply this to stocks if you're day trading Apple or IBM. It doesn't matter. Same principle applies, any time frame, any direction. Okay, then you say, well, Steve, I'm not a day trader. I trade stocks. But this may work some of the time, but there's no way that it's ever going to help you with news. Okay? I mean, you can be in a position, some information can come out, stock will get up 10 or down 10, 20 points. It doesn't matter. It can jump above or below, oscillate above or below this buy-sell line. How's that going to help me? Okay? The news is what kills me. It's true, and the news can kill you sometimes. But once again, this is a numbers game. More often than not, the simple tool will keep you out of trouble and keep you on the right side. Let's look at back in May of this past year. J.P. Morgan suffers big loss. J.P. Morgan Chase, in a surprise announcement, said Thursday that it had suffered trading losses of $2 billion since the start of April. The group that suffered the losses is part of the bank's so-called corporate unit that had been making trades designed, of all things, to hedge against risk. Shares of J.P. Morgan fell 9% in early trading. So this is what people are concerned about. It doesn't matter if you use this buy-sell line. News like this is going to kill me no matter what side I'm on. Okay? All right. Well, let's look at J.P. Morgan. As we see here, it had been doing rather well, actually. And let's say you just purchased it somewhere around these levels, which I believe is around 40 or so. And you were doing quite well until this portion, beginning of May, where it started to hit some resistance and then started to go lower. And then at this point right here, here's where the news came out on the 11th. It's down 9%. So you used to have, if you had purchased it somewhere here, or maybe lower, perhaps you purchased it even here, you have a substantial loss now. Granted. Could the buy-sell line have helped us at all in this scenario? Well, we add the buy-sell line. We ask ourselves, where is price in relation to the buy-sell line? And we see that as early as May 7th, we had consecutive closes below the buy-sell line, which could have given us an early warning if we had bought up here to get out or to move our stop much lower, or much higher, I should say, to protect ourselves. Or we could have taken some off the table. But we just know now that we're on the wrong side of the market. Now, if we were thinking about exiting, we could have exited and would have missed this entirely. And you have captured some profits and just stayed on the sidelines. So even though it's not guaranteed, the buy-sell line will help you tremendously at times, even with stock news that comes out. Now let's say you had decided to stay out of the market, you had taken a small loss or a small profit and stayed out. You could have stayed in and looked to get back into J.P. Morgan. Here's where the news came out. Until right here, when we started to go back up, and here's a nice pullback. And this chart goes all the way up until the end of October. So you see, you could have missed all those losses, another 5, 6 points, and gotten back in, held on to your cash. This concept works in any market, any direction. Here's a Swiss franc. As you can see here, we had some tremendous moves to the upside, to the downside. Someone looking at this would say, boy, over the course of a year, I basically break even. Not if you apply the buy-sell line. The entire time we were above the buy-sell line, you could have looked for these pullbacks here to go long. And once we consistently closed below, you would have gotten out and looked for pullbacks to go short. Now, rule of thumb, a lot of day traders ask me this because many times you'll see price oscillate above, below the buy-sell line. They said, well, it's above for 2 bars, below for 2 bars. The rule of thumb is look for at least 2 to 3 closes either above or below the buy-sell line in order to be on the right side of the market. So in other words, just because we close once above the 50-period simple moving average, that doesn't mean, okay, well, I'm going to start looking for longs tomorrow. Wait for it to close at least a couple of times, either above or below, before you know which side to be on. All right, I just want to spend a few minutes talking about the crash, 1987. 25 years ago, in fact, this past month. Okay, as I stated, I was on the floor. I believe my friend here, Pat, was on the floor as well. Probably one of the most dramatic days I've ever experienced trading. I was on the floor. At that time, I had not changed. Everything I'm teaching you and sharing with you today and everything on my website, I hadn't accumulated this knowledge yet. So once again, I was at the point where I knew I had to make some big changes, but I was still trading the same way I used to, trying to pick tops and pick bottoms. Now on that day, that fateful day, the market was down over 22% or 508 points. Now if you want to compare that, that's not very much to today's standards, but if you want to compare that, that would be equal to being down, the market being down roughly about 3,000 points in one day. And remember, during the crash, there were no trading halts, there were no programs to stop the trading. We just continued trading the entire day. Those were only initiated, I believe, afterwards because of the crash. So just imagine in today's market, say yesterday, the market just continued to go lower and lower, down 1,000 points, down 2,000 points. I mean, it would be a debacle. It would be unbelievably disastrous. It was the same, in relative terms, excuse me, it was the same way during the crash. I came in that day thinking it's time for the market to bottom. I said, the market's going to bottom today. It will not go any lower. So when the market opened, it opened down 100 or so points, which was still a lot in those days, and proceeded to go lower. It was down 200, down 250. Now, as specialists, our job was to create fair and orderly markets. We had to set markets or better markets as compared to New York, but there was nothing we could do other than buy. I mean, the machines, all the computers were just spitting out sell orders. We had to buy. That was our job. That's why prices kept going lower and lower, because no one wanted to get stuck buying at the same price. And so it was different from an individual investor. Our job was to buy. But what we did was we played a game called hot potato, which basically everything you bought you immediately sold to another regional exchange or back to New York. So you bought something at 50, you sold it immediately to someone else as much as you could because you didn't want to hold this. And everyone was doing the same thing. It was basically creating the cycle, which was driving down prices even lower, along with real selling. So it was just you were digging yourself deeper in a hole. The market kept going lower and lower. Roughly about 9 o'clock Pacific time, when the market was down 250 points, I told my assistant, I said, quit selling everything. Hold on to all our stuff. And she thought I was nuts. She said, what? And I said, hold on. Do not sell anymore. I think we've stopped. She says, okay, whatever you say. Believe it or not, the market paused. And a lot of people don't know, but to this day, it's still not known, but we had a small little minor bounce. In fact, I think we bounced up to only down 75 or 50 points. And at that point, I sold everything I had held on to. Quickly, I told her, get out of everything. Sell everything we have. We keep buying things, just sell it, sell it. She sold it, and in roughly an hour's work, we made close to $250,000. The best trading day I've ever had. I said, I don't know what everybody's complaining about. This is simple. This is too easy. This is free money. So the market started to sell off again. Here it is now, 10 o'clock, we're down 100. Now we're down 200, down 250. I told my assistant once again, I said, if it worked before, it's going to work again, right? This is what they call support, right? So hold on to everything. She said, okay, down 250, down 300, hold on, down 350, down 400, keep holding, keep buying, down 450. At that time, there was nothing you could do but buy. It was so chaotic, it was just nuts. There was nothing you could do other than continue to buy anyway. So we basically just threw our hands up in the air and just said, there's nothing we can do. I mean, a lot of the computer systems went down. We had no idea what our positions were. We just knew that we were what was called over your money. We had purchased more than we had capital to pay for. And it was just a debacle. Everyone just had no idea what was going on. Roughly about an hour after the close, maybe more than that, when the computers came up and we figured out what we had done, realized that I had not only lost the $250,000 that I had made, but I lost an extra $750,000. So what was a few hours earlier the best day I'd ever had was the worst day I ever had. And compared to many of the other specialists on the floor, I actually came out rather unscathed. Many of them were down $2, $3, $5 million. Many of them were totally out of business. A lot of the specialists in New York were out of business. They couldn't. They had to look for assistance. They couldn't pay for all the losses they had. So even though it's a little slightly different scenario for a specialist, our job was to hold on and create these markets, and we had no other choice but to buy. What about the individual investor? What about the people that had money in their IRA? What about the people that had portfolios? Could they have maybe sidestepped the crash altogether, or could they have maybe used this buy-sell line to help them? Well, here is the chart of the Dow. Here's the crash 25 years ago, this past October 19. This is where the market fell out of bed 22%. Once again, traders like Pat and I, we had no choice. We had to buy. But what if you were an individual investor? Could you have maybe used the tool to help you? Well, if we apply the buy-sell line, we see as early as 2 to 3 weeks earlier, where was price in relation to the buy-sell line? At the beginning of October, we were below. Consecutive closes below the buy-sell line. So if you're an independent trader, or if you had money in your IRA, or whatever, remember, the market had been going straight up in 1987, just like 2007. You could have taken some money off the table. You could have waited and said, you know what, I'm not going to buy anymore. I'm going to wait and see, and stay on the sidelines. Or if you're an aggressive trader, you could have gotten short and just absolutely made a killing. So do you see how the simple things, the most basic of things, are what really work and will get you on this road to consistency? It doesn't take some neural network plan. It doesn't take some convoluted system to get you on the right side, to get you on that road to success. It's the simplest things that I've found over time that work much better, that are more valid than the complicated things. Remember, as my mentor taught me, any trader, any damn fool can complicate your trading. But it takes real discipline and character to simplify your trading. And I can't think of anything more simple than this. So that's where we had the clue of the market telling us you shouldn't be long. Now let's just take a look at some current buy-sell lines. These are snapshots taken from the end of October, October 31st. And we all know, because of the conditions the last couple of days, a lot of things have changed. But as they often say, the more things change, the more things stay the same. Here's a chart of Apple up until October 31st. Now as you see here, along this whole way up, even though we had some consecutive closes below here, there were no signs to go short, and then we quickly jumped back up above. There's no reason you should have been shorting Apple or looking to get out of Apple until right here. And you would have missed all of this downward movement. And I believe it's even lower than this chart now. Okay, so the buy-sell line gave you clues as early as October to get out of Apple on a daily bar basis. Okay? How about Google? So I believe this was some type of news or whatever. That doesn't really matter. The point is, once again, we don't care why it's raining, we just react with what's happening. So now that we see Google is below, if you trade options on that or intraday trade at Google, this can help you as a reference. Now there are some charts, such as AMD, that have been below the buy-sell line for ages. They haven't been up above for a long time. So it's not like every chart is in sync with every chart. There's some charts that have been telling you to go short or to be short for a long, long time. You see all these pullback references where you could have gotten in all these pullbacks using our tools and indicators? And at the same time, well, some charts may be below the buy-sell line, way ahead of the current market conditions. There are other charts that have been above the buy-sell line for a long time and continue to be above the buy-sell line, such as AEP. So this is why I don't use higher time frames or the broader market to determine. If I were in AEP, I probably would have exited a long time ago when the market first went under the buy-sell line, but I'm just trading for what I see on the current chart. Once again, this is my personal preference. It's up to you. Trade the euro dollar. On a daily basis, the euro dollar has been above the buy-sell line, so you'd still be long the euro dollar. Crude oil, it kind of oscillates below, above, and now it's below. So anything you'd be doing on a daily basis in crude oil, you'd be looking at the short side. It's just that simple. Where is price in relation to the buy-sell line? Here's a chart of the S&P 500. Now, you see here that here's where we were having trouble. We were kind of oscillating back and forth, but at this point we were steadily above. In the middle of October, here's where we sold off, as you can see. Now, I believe the last 2 days, or the first 2 days of November, we had a nice rally up to here, but I think we're still back down to these levels because of the sell-off. Now, a lot of people were surprised by that sell-off. They go, boy, I thought, what was it, the jobless numbers came out, that's good news, or, listen to the buy-sell line. Listen to the most important thing. Keep that noise and distraction at bay. Most important thing is the chart in front of you. Using the buy-sell line, it's telling us that the S&P 500 should only be looked at going short. Now, I know traders who use this and traders who know how to read the market, such as my good friend Pat here, we're short. We're short ourselves. We were short, got short Friday as well, because we're listening to the market, not focusing on these external things here. We understand them, but we keep them at bay. We only give so much attention to them. The most important thing is your insight into how the market's moving. Okay, any questions on our first edge? I realize this gentleman had a question over here. Yes?
Just on the 5-minute chart, on the E-minis, are you using the overnight session when you're doing the SMA?
You can. It doesn't matter at all. It doesn't matter. Whatever chart you decide to use, if you trade the overnight session and you incorporate that in your charts, then the 50 period should be up there. If you don't and you say, no, I only trade the regular session, then plot regular session bars and put the 50. But it's up to you. certain strategies we take off of the overnight session in specialist trading. Other strategies go off the regular. So it just depends on what you're trading, on what style and what format. But the question was, if you're trading intraday E-minis, should you be looking at the overnight charts or just it doesn't matter. It works on any chart, any time frame. Any questions about the buy-sell line? Yes,
Just
sir.
a comment. I was curious about the 50-day moving average a year or two ago and ran an optimization on the S&P 500, I think over 5 years.
Mhm.
I used an exponential moving average.
Uh-huh.
But surprisingly, if you buy when price closes below and or sell when it closes below, buy when it closes above, the optimization came out to 52.
Really?
So it's very close to
Yeah.
surprised me.
Basically, what he was saying, he back tested and researched if you had gone long when the S&P 500 went above the 50 exponential or went below, and surprisingly good results. Now remember though that this is just an edge. It's a tool designed to get you on the right side. So we fine-tuned it a little bit, but this is not a strategy. I think a lot of our students, the minute they see this, their eyes light up and they go, "Oh my gosh, Apple traded below the 50. I'm going to short right the market." That's not the proper way to use it. Okay, it's just the design as to whatever you have to have a strategy or a plan first, and when it designates or issues some type of signal, ask yourself, is it in line with the buy-sell line? That's it. And there's, once again, it's not written in stone, it's not magic. If you want to use a 50 exponential, if you want to use a 55 Fibonacci number, that's okay. It's more the concept of being in sync with the market that's most important. Okay. Okay, any other questions before we go on to our second most powerful edge? This is, whereas the buy-sell line is used in virtually everything we trade, this is used in about 75% of everything we trade. And this is a tool, a great technique to fine-tune your entries. So a lot of you were asking about entries, about that. This is what this is designed for. This is our confirmation method. And what it is it's a clear-cut plan for entry. But remember, people base their entries on outside sources. Remember we talked about a chat room, a trading room, news. What we want is something that's based on what the market is telling you. I can't emphasize enough that you should be only following the most important thing, and that's the market. Or you should be giving 90% of your attention to that, and not what an outside source is telling you. Okay? Remember, once you start giving your attention to this outside source, you've taken yourself out of the game. We don't want to do that. So it should be based on what the market is telling us and not what an outside source is telling us. That's the foundation of the confirmation method. All right, so here's what it is. It's the verification, here's the definition, it's a verification that the trend has resumed in the desired direction. Okay? This is your signal to enter the trade. A specialist always waits for his trade to be confirmed. Now what do we mean the trend has resumed? I thought we're already in sync with the trend. Here's the best way that was described to me. Imagine you're at a train station and you want to get from point A to point B. So you're standing at the railroad tracks and you see a train coming down the tracks. But the train coming down the tracks is going in the exact opposite direction of where you want to go. Are you going to jump on that train? Most likely you wouldn't. But that's the way 99% of all traders trade. Stock is going straight down, I'm going to buy. It's too low. Or it's going straight up, going the opposite direction, I'm going to sell. See, what we want to do is stand at that train station, wait for a train to come down the tracks that's going in our direction. And that's the one we're going to jump on. It's the same way with trading. Whatever we're trading, the Forex, the E-mini stocks, we want to wait and see that it is going in our direction, then we jump on board. That's the verification that the trend has resumed. Okay? All right, so these are the rules to the confirmation method. Please remember, this is an entry technique. This is not a strategy. You can apply this to your already current trading strategy. But I don't care what strategy you use. Once again, it doesn't matter if it's based off the tides of the ocean or fundamental news. Let's just say your strategy issues a signal. Okay? Let's say it's a buy signal. Before you normally buy at the market or place a limit order, after a signal has been given, only buy once price trades 1 to 2 ticks above the original entry bar. That's the confirmation method. So we want to see price trade 1 or 2 ticks above the previous bar. If entry does not take place on the second bar, just continue this process with each preceding bar, as long as the strategy says it's okay to go long, or as long as you're filled, or until you get filled, or unless the strategy says cancel, it's no longer valid. You all wrote that down? You copied that down? I want to show you some examples that may make some better sense, actually, if we look at a chart. Obviously, we're in an uptrend, okay? Now, let's say out of this consolidation, you get a signal to go long here. Rather than simply buy at the market or place a limit order, we're going to only buy when price trades one tick above the previous bar's high, okay? So as you can see, rather than simply buying right here, we're going to wait to see it trade above. And not until we trade above will we buy. And so this is where we enter, and then as you can see, the train leaves the station. We start to go in that direction. You see, the purpose of confirmation is not to get us in at the lowest price. We don't care about that. If we get a much better price, great. But that's not the purpose. The purpose of confirmation method is to get us in the minute the trend is going in our direction. Because we all know as traders, the worst thing in the world is you buy something and the minute you buy it, it goes down, right? It's the worst feeling in the world. Or the minute you sell something, it goes up. Now, it doesn't mean you're wrong, because later on the trade may work in your favor. But it's having to sit through those 2 or 3 days or 2 or 3 hours where you're losing money, you start to second guess, you start to doubt your trading plan, you think, should I do this? Should I just get out of this trade? I've had 2 or 3 losses in a row, maybe I should exit. So you stop yourself out and then it goes in your direction. It's much better to wait till it's going and jump on board the train while it's leaving the station. Okay? So we're not trying to pick a bottom. All we're trying to do is find the most opportune time to enter, which is using the confirmation method. Same thing applies for sells, okay? Whatever your strategy is, if it gives you a sell signal, rather than simply sell at the market or place a limit order, you're only going to enter or sell once price trades 1 to 2 ticks below the original entry bar. That's it. So once price trades below, that's your verification that the trend has resumed in that direction. Now, if it doesn't take place on the next or second bar, continue this process with each preceding bar as long as your strategy says it's okay to go short or you get filled, or if your strategy says cancel, we're no longer valid. Okay? So obviously we're in a downtrend, all right? Markets are falling out of bed. Let's say some news comes out and so your strategy says to go short right here. Rather than just sell at the market, know that you're only going to go short once we trade at these red horizontal lines, once we trade 1 tick below. And you see how once you get in, how the trend resumes in your favor. You see, had you sold somewhere down here, you would have had to sit through 2 or 3 days of upward movement. You probably would have gotten scared. You would have thrown in the towel, taken a small loss, and then 2 days later you would have seen it go and you would have sat there like most people go, I knew it was going down. Why did I get out? I was right. It wasn't that your signal was wrong. It was that your entry was faulty. So this is a great tool to fine-tune your entry. Now, it also has another advantage by using the confirmation method, because not only is it designed to get us in at the beginning of a trend, but it's also, as an extra advantage, will keep us out of bad trades as well. And some of the best trades are the trades you never take. Let's say this example. We see a real ranging market here going sideways. We've got some support. Say you think this is support right here. You really feel strongly about this. When we get right back down to these levels, you're going to buy again. And this is where you would normally buy. Okay? You place a limit order at these old lows. You think it's going to hold. But if you're using confirmation, there's no confirmation to buy yet. You're waiting for it to trade 1 tick above. Okay? So whereas you didn't use confirmation, you entered here. But using the confirmation method, you're still waiting for it to trade on the next bar above here. So let's see what happens on the next bars. Never traded above. Never traded above the previous bar. So you never got into the trade. You just saved yourself all that money, all those sleepless nights worrying about what's going to happen, because the confirmation method kept you out. So that's another advantage of using this technique. Many times it'll keep you out of bad trades. All this stuff is very simple, and I'm sure many of you have heard of it before, but are you implementing it? Let me show you some more confirmation examples, just again to show you that all this works in any time frame, in any direction. If you're a day trader, we're above the buy-sell line, so you're only looking to go long. We have a little breakout here. Rather than just buy, you'll wait for the confirmation method, and as soon as we trade 1 tick above, we're off to the races to the upside. Here's an example in Tiffany. We're above the buy-sell line. Let's say you got a buy signal here, but you use the confirmation method. Well, guess what? You never got in. Because the one time it traded above the previous day's high, it gapped open, probably on some news. So you're sitting there going, I missed it. But as long as your signal is still in effect, you can continue to use it, and you would have entered right here. And it's off to the races. So it was still valid to use. in a different scenario. How about the QQQs? This was just at the beginning of October where we crossed the QQQs crossed below. You could have thought, wow, we're really going to fall out of bed on this little pennant right here. But rather than just simply sell at the market, wait for price to trade one tick below in this pullback. And that's where you could have had a really nice entry to the downside and captured a lot of selling in the QQQs. Baxter, there's a number of examples where you had buy signals on these pullbacks where you could have used this simple method for entry. Canadian dollar, this was in August. We're below the buy-sell line. Normally you would sell once you broke this little support, and if you had sold right here, you would have had to sit through 4 days of the market going totally against you, and I'm definitely sure you would have stopped yourself out and said, I can't take these losses. But had you waited for a price to trade one tick below, you could have entered at a much better price. But more importantly, once you would have entered, guess what? It would have been going in your direction. You would have never had to sit through any losses. See, that's the purpose of this technique again. It's not to get you in at a great price. It's just so that you don't have to sit through those 3 or 4 days the minute you get into a trade where it go against you. All right, so reviewing the confirmation method. Remember, only listen to what the market is telling you what to do. Don't think about these outside sources because they're only going to be distractions and they're going to keep you from being successful. If you're buying, buy one tick above the previous bar's high. If you're selling, sell below the previous bar's low. As an extra advantage, the confirmation method will keep you out of losers many times as well. Okay? So this brings us to the end of this section. Any questions about confirmation before we move to the last section? Yes, sir.
Your entry is one tick, while the bar is still forming.
No, the signal bar has completed.
The signal bar is completed,
Right.
but then the next bar is still forming, not
Right.
knowing where the close is going to be.
Doesn't matter where the close is, as long as you trade above the previous bar's high. Yeah. And as long as, now we have many strategies that only call for the next bar, and that's it, because we're trying to catch momentum. If it doesn't happen in the next bar, the signal is negated. But there are other strategies where they continue, as long as the requirements are met, you continue to track it the way I just showed you, where it just keeps falling and falling. You stay in until the strategy says it's no longer valid or unless you're filled. But all we're not concerned with the close, we're just concerned that it traded there. We're trying to catch that momentum, the train station leaving the station. Any other questions before we move on? We have one more section before we take a quick break. All right, let's move on, lastly, to the number one chart pattern. I know a lot of people like to look at charts, and we have this on our website for a free service, but this is a great directional tool, in my opinion, to tell you, once again, the short-term direction of the market. I know a lot of people like to look at patterns. The only problem with patterns is that they're very subjective. Someone can see a head and shoulders, and at the same time, someone seeing a head and shoulders, someone can see a ascending wedge. There's a million and one things you can see. And so it's too subjective. I like things that are more cut and dry, where there's really no room for doubt, no question, and that have some element of consistency to them. And this number one chart pattern really does. We incorporate this in about 75% of our trading strategies. Okay? It applies to going both long and short. You can use it in virtually any time frame and any bar chart, and it's best used as a directional tool. Okay? This is not a system, this is not a chart pattern where it gives you a signal, it's a directional tool. But the more you see of these, when you're in sync with the buy-sell line, the better idea. Once again, this is all the discretionary input I'm sharing with you so that you can come up with ideas according to your experience of which direction you think the market's going to go, and then you can apply accordingly your own insight. All right, so are you all ready for the number one chart pattern? That's it. That's it. I told you it's about keeping things as simple as possible, right? It doesn't get any simpler than that. If you see, especially on an intraday basis, a chart close either at or in the top 25% of its range, the market is telling you it's most likely going higher. I don't care if it's a 5-minute time frame or a monthly chart. And there's a sell signal. If you see a bar, regardless of time frame, close in the bottom 25% or the very bottom of its range, the market is telling you it's going to go lower. Now, people look at this and go, that's it? I mean, I thought it was going to be something complicated with looking over days or months. So why is this so important? We might want to write this down. When a price bar closes either at the top or bottom of its range, the market is giving you a clue as to which direction it wants to go, just like I previously said. It's giving you a tremendous clue. Remember, we're always looking for insights about coming from the market, not from an outside source. And this is one of the greatest insights you can see. I'm going to show you a lot of examples of how this works. When a price bar closes either at the top or bottom of its range, the market is giving you a clue as to which direction it wants to go. All right, so let's look at some intraday examples. When you trade intraday, regardless if it's a stock, the E-mini, the Forex markets, you're going to see a lot of bars that close at the very top and very bottom. Okay? So we want to see these in sync with the buy-sell line. As we see here, here's a 5-minute chart of the E-mini. We're above the buy-sell line. And we have these nice little pullbacks. As you can see, when we have come to the end of a pullback and we trade above this bar here, look what happens, 3 points to the upside. Okay, that's $150 per contract. If you're trading 10, that's $1,500 in about half an hour. We have another pullback. Most of the bars are closing in the mid part in the range. We have one that closed top here, but we never went above it. Here we closed here at the very top of the range, traded above it, and now it's 4 points higher. Okay? Because those simple chart patterns were giving you clues to the end of some type of sell-off, the beginning of the direction of a new upward trend. We're kind of oscillating below and above the buy-sell line in this 5-minute chart. We have a pullback though. We've risen. We're going against the downward move. We're looking for a bar that closes in the bottom 25%, or bottom of its range, I should say, and this bar does right here. And we trade below it. See, we had one here, but we never traded below it. We trade below it, quick 4 points. Okay? Looking at tick bars, you're going to see a lot of these tick bars. At the end of the little sell-offs, those are your clues to get back in. Those are your clues that the market's going to be heading higher by closing at the top of the range. Same thing to the downside. We're going lower. We're on the lower side of the 50-period simple moving average. We have these little bounces, these little rallies in price. When we see a bar close at the very low, that's our signal that the market has given us a clue we're most likely going lower. Here's a chart of IBM going back to last week. Okay, 30-minute chart. If you're a day trader, intraday trader, we're below the buy-sell line, and while we're below, we have no bars that really close at the very bottom. But guess what? While we're below, look at the clue the market has given us. On a 30-minute time frame, 2 bars close at the very high of their range. Now we're below the buy-sell line, so we're not trying to go long, but the market has given us a clue. It's telling us as to the short-term direction it wants to go, and then lo and behold, IBM bounced from 91.5 up to 94, okay? All because of these 2 clues up here. Now we are on the right side in order to go long, all right? We start to have a sell-off, a pullback, so we're looking for bars that close now in the top portion of the range. Right here, we have 2 bars giving us great signals that most likely we're going to be heading higher. These are the clues the market has given you. We start to head higher, and lo and behold, look what happens. You see, it's not that advanced, it's just the market is telling you what it's going to do. You can save a lot of time and energy not having to waste on trading rooms and chat rooms by just simply listening to the market. It tells you everything you need to know. And there was another bar that closed at the top. Now, position trading, you're not going to have that many bars closing at the top. It's just the way the markets are constructed, but you will have a lot closing in the upper range. So the rule is, for holding positions overnight, if you're going long, look for a setup bar to close either at the high or in the top 25% of its range, okay? So if it closes at the high, so much better. But if it's in the top 25, that's just as good. And if you're going short, look for a setup bar to either close at the low or in the bottom 25% of its range. Let's look at Netflix coming into the middle of October. We were below the buy-sell line, and all the time we were below, we had these lots of bars telling us we're going much lower. But guess what? Right here, on a breakout to the upside, this bar closed in the top 25%, followed by a very strong rally, 10 points. So at this point right here, we were not only above the buy-sell line, but the market was giving you a clue that we're most likely, for the very short term, going to go higher. If you're short, get out. If you're thinking about long, look for a strategy or something that's going to coincide with this that tells you to get in. And at the same time, these were all telling you it's okay to be short. How about the British pound? Now, looking back in hindsight, this was a a very nice sustained rally. And looking back, anyone would say, well, yeah, it's easy to see where we're going up. But what about when you were in the trade? Look at all these bars that closed in the top 25% of their range. The whole time, the British pound is giving you clues, telling you, remain long, stay long. How about Verizon, VRSN? This is coming into this month. As we can see here, we're above the buy-sell line. Not much is happening. We're pretty much just ranging. We have some bars here that are telling us that we're still going higher. And up until this point right here, the market is still telling us we're most likely going to go higher. So don't sell. Continue holding on to the position. But guess what? Right here, 2 bars close at their very low. At the very low. What's the clue? Not only are we below the buy-sell line, but it's given us a great clue that most likely the market is headed in that direction. Okay? All without any news, all without being in any chat room, all without subscribing to some trading guru. The market told you a week or two in advance to get out. We're most likely going low. All right, points to remember. This is a pattern. It's not a strategy. It's a directional tool. It's a great clue to tell you the short-term direction of the market. The market is giving you a great clue as to what it wants to do. Does it work 100% of the time? No. It's a clue. It's something to give you that insight as to which you want to apply for your discretion. Okay? Our goal is to increase your odds. We're not going to promise that we're giving you things here that work 100% of the time. We're just trying to put the odds in your favor so that you have this consistency. Let's recap. 75% of our trading strategies use this number 1 chart pattern. It applies to going both long and short. We can use it in any time frame, any bar, any market, and it's best used as a directional tool. Okay, so let's review this first portion before we go on to, we'll take a break and then go on to strategy number 1. We talked about the difference between a system and a strategy, 2 entirely different ways to trade, all right? At Specialist Trading, I'm sure you can tell by now, we only trade strategies. I've traded systems. I have nothing against them. I just feel if you're trying to get on that road to consistency, the odds are more likely in your favor that you'll be successful if you trade strategies. Okay? Concepts 1 and 2. Always trade with a trend. Trade pullbacks within the trend. Once again, keep it as simple as possible. Swim with the current at your back. Jump into the river when there's no one in there. When the sellers have left, that's when you want to go in and sell. When the buyers have left, that's when you want to dive in and buy. Okay? Edge number 1, our buy-sell line. Okay? The most important tool. It's the only tool I would want to trade with if everything was stripped away. If they erased my memory, I would only want to have edge number 1. Out of 35 years, this is the most important edge I've ever had that's helped me, made me thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars, and saved me, more importantly, thousands of dollars. 50-period simple moving average. Always ask yourselves, regardless of what strategy, whenever it gives you a signal to go long or go short, ask yourselves, where is price in relation to the buy-sell line? That'll be your answer. Edge number 2, the confirmation method, which basically is a fine-tuning technique for entry. Only buy if price trades 1 or 2 ticks above the previous bar. Only sell if price trades 1 or 2 ticks below the previous bar. And then finally, the number 1 chart pattern. When a price bar closes at the top of its range or bottom of its range, the market itself is giving you a tremendous clue as to the short-term direction it wants to go. Okay? Not an outside source, but the very market you're trading. Now, giving you a homework assignment. I bet you didn't think you were going to come here and get a homework assignment, right? That, boy, not only do I have to pay, but I got to do an assignment too. It's actually not difficult. You don't have to turn it in. But I want you just to ask yourself this. Ask yourself, seriously, do you think any of the edges that I presented you today could have helped your trading? Just look back when you go home, look back at your trades, apply any one of these things, the buy-sell line, confirmation, number 1 chart pattern, anything, and see if it could have helped you becoming part of the process. I really think that it could. I really think that even one small minor thing could have elevated your trading and taken you to the next level. So I hope you can use these things. Remember, my goal is to teach you. Specialist education, even though we provide signals, we are first and foremost an educational company. That's really what we do. We try to teach traders how to trade. So I'm not going to sit there and make your trades for you. I want you to be a part of the process and understand how it's done. Just the same way my mentors taught me, that's what I'm trying to pass on to all my students and members. So my goal is to teach you how to trade with the Specialist Edge. Okay, this concludes the first part, Secrets of a Stock Exchange Specialist, part 1. I'm sure we all need a break here, but I'll take any questions before the singing gets too loud and drowns out everybody. If we, this must be some systematic traders over there. But if you have any questions right now, we can answer them. We'll take a short break for me to clear my throat, and then I'm going to share with you one of the strategies that is usually reserved for our members of specialist trading. I'm going to share with you and give you the rules so you can start trading it as early as Monday in its most basic form. And we'll show you a lot of examples, a lot of real-world examples, and I'll show you exactly how to implement it, and using the things that I described today. Okay, so any questions, or else we can take a break. If you want to contact us, just real quickly, here is the information. My associate, Brett Marsh, you can contact him at brettam@specialisttrading.com or call 310-844-7220. Yes?
Can you share a range of how many members that you have that are active?
Our strategies, first of all, are traded in over 35 countries. We have anywhere from hedge fund traders to mom and pop, a husband and wife team trading out of a home in Encinitas, California. We have ongoing, at any point, roughly about 50 members, but we've had hundreds of members coming in and go. Once you really learn and become a member, you're really a student for life. You can always contact me, but mostly everyone gets it within the first 6 months to a year, and then you just stay in contact. You just get a refresher course or something. It's not like we dish it out and then see you later, good luck, nice knowing you. It's more of an educational course, and we have a lot of students and that we've had, when I first started 3 years ago, that will contact me and say they're still trading one particular strategy they love, and they pretty much not use anything else, but that's the one they focus on. I go, great, that's all I wanted to do. Find something that works for you. And I'll contact them maybe to answer any questions. Anyone else? Any questions? Should we take a break?
10 minutes?
Yeah, let's take a 10-minute break, and then I'll give you the strategy. Okay, so we finished part one. I'm sure you're all thoroughly confused now. I hope not. And we're ready to go on to Secrets of a Stock Exchange Specialist, part two, where I'm going to be talking about a strategy. But before we begin, I'm going to give you one last chance. If you have any questions concerning what we went over in the previous section, feel free to ask now. We can go over anything from a system, strategy, concepts, edge, buy, sell line, confirmation, chart, pattern, or even your homework assignment. Anything? Yes, sir.
Just one quick question. When you showed all those bars that you had circled
Right.
that closed close to the end of the range, all those were just normal bars.
Daily bars.
It'd be a lot easier to see if they were candlestick bars. I wonder your comment on candlestick.
Okay, the question was, when you're looking at the number one chart pattern, the bar either closes at the top of its range or in the top 25% or vice versa. The gentleman was saying it's a lot easier to see with candlesticks. That's fine. If that's what works for you, then use a candlestick. You see, this is not giving you any signals. It's not telling you what to do. It's just giving you a clue as to the short-term direction. So if you can see that easier, I see a lot of things easier with my glasses on. Someone doesn't need glasses. It doesn't matter. We're seeing the same thing. So all that point out is, I think he's trying to make the comment is sometimes you'll be able to see it easier with a candlestick, and that's fine. So if you want to see that, it doesn't matter what type of a bar you're looking at as long as it closes in the top 25% of its range. The market is giving you not only a clue, but a tremendous clue as to the short-term direction, okay? Any other questions before we move on? Okay, let's talk about strategy number one. This is one of our premier strategies. It's more of a pullback strategy, which we just talked about. It's one of our premier strategies, usually reserved just for the members of Specialist Trading, but we're going to show and share with you the rules for it. As I stated, you can start trading this as early as Monday, but please, I would advise against that because, like anything, it's like someone saying, okay, I learned how to make a free throw. Great, you're going to play in the Denver Nuggets starting Monday. You can't do that. You have to practice. You have to get up to that certain level where you can start really implementing correctly. So I would suggest use this as much as you like by paper trading it. See how well it works for you. Some strategies work well for some people and some don't, not in terms of working well with making profits, but they just don't fit their persona. A lot of people like action, so we have specific strategies that are more conducive to being in and out very quickly. A lot of people like this more kind of fluid, kind of pullback, swing trading. Strategy 1 is perfect for that. And so that's okay. If it doesn't fit, that's fine. But try it, paper trade it to see if it fits with your persona. Everyone's got a different way of trading, but you can still use the same concepts, the same edges, as long as they fit your style. Remember, you're part of the process, okay? All right, so we're going to talk about strategy number 1. But before we begin, as always, we're required to show you our disclaimer. I'm going to show you some performance results, and I'll show you a lot of results, current results using strategy number 1 in the E-mini, in the Forex markets, and in stocks. But please remember that we can in no way guarantee that any of these results will be repeated. Once again, I usually reserve the questions for the end, but I'm sure you're going to have a lot of questions, so feel free to ask a question whenever you want. I'm kind of breaking tradition here. So it's not that, you know, I'm sure a lot of things will be explained as we go on from slide to slide, but feel free. Whenever you have a question, we'll stop, or I'll say just a moment, just let me finish my thought, and then we'll take your question, okay? All right, now here's the beauty of strategy number 1. Strategy number 1 works great with scenarios like this. Doesn't matter if this is a 5-minute chart, weekly chart, what market, Forex market, stocks, doesn't matter. All that matters is that strategy number 1 is going to help us discern the trend. Now, according to the rules of strategy number 1, we're in an uptrend here, okay? And strategy number 1 is going to help us pick out certain scenarios, certain zones to go long. These are our pivot point areas right here. Now, looking back in hindsight, if we're going long, these are the most advantageous places to get long, right? Right here in these little areas. Strategy number 1 is going to pinpoint these and show us that we should be entering some type of trigger point right here. And then lastly, strategy number 1 will tell us exactly where to enter. These are the 2 entry points using strategy number 1. This works if we're going up or if we're going down. Someone just off site would say, well, this looks like a rangy market, Steve. We're going up, we're going down, just kind of in a range. Actually, the strategy is telling us that we're in a downtrend. And if we're a downtrend, this means we only want to sell, right? We don't want to go long. We're not trying to pick a bottom, even though someone could have said, well, Steve, I could have picked a real nice bottom right here, maybe right here. Doesn't matter. We're going with the water, with the current at our back, which means we're going to sell on the pullback right here. Strategy number 1 will pinpoint this pullback for us, and it will tell us where to enter. We'll be right here. Okay? Very simple, right? We're in sync with the market. We're in tune with it. We're not fighting it. And we're simply trading concepts number 1 and 2. Trade with the trend and enter on pullbacks within the trend, okay? All right, so you might want to write this down, and I'm going to go into the rules later on. The highlights, it's a trend following strategy. Strategy is based on concepts 1 and 2. You can use this in any time frame and any market. We have standard and conservative versions. I'm going to share with you the standard and the conservative version today. It's designed to trade moderate pullbacks, okay? So we're not looking for these quick momentum moves. We have other strategies which are more conducive for these quick momentum moves or these quick kind of consolidation moves. This is more of a nice swing pullback. Remember, our edge here is consistency. This will work great sometimes. Other times it won't work. Other times you'll go into a choppy market where I'm sure you know by now, experience, almost nothing works in a choppy market. But we have ways, if you become a member and join the courses, of how to stay out of those choppy markets. All right, these are the indicators that we're using. Our buy-sell line, which we virtually use in everything, the 50-period simple moving average, and the number 1 indicator we told you about earlier, the 21-period Donchian channels. Those are the only 2 indicators we're going to use. And really, the 50-period moving average is not even an indicator. We're just using it as the buy-sell line. Where is price in relation to that buy-sell line? Once we have used it that way, then we don't have to worry about it anymore. It's not like an indicator that we're constantly tracking. So the only indicator we're really using is the 21-period Donchian channel. Okay? All right, here are the rules for buys. Okay? These are all the rules. Let's go on. No, don't. I'm kidding. These are rules for buys. Don't worry, keep them up there as long as you want. Oops. Is that okay? Left-handed. That's my left-handedness we talked about. The trading gods punished me for putting that fast joke on you there. Okay, these are the, remember, we're using concepts 1 and 2. Concept number 1 is we want to find the trend first. So how do we find the trend? Well, first thing we do is price must be above the 50-period simple moving average. That's our rule number 1. And the second part of this first rule is all 3 Donchian channels must be headed in the same stair-stepped upward direction. If we have those 2 things in place, concept number 1 is completed, is fulfilled. It's rule number 1. Now that we found the trend, concept number 2, we're looking for the pullback. How do we find the pullback? We're going to look to buy when the rising price bar first begins to decline. In other words, it starts to sell off and eventually touches the midline of the rising channel. Okay? So we have the 3 channels going up, but now a bar is selling off. Remember you had asked earlier, like, well, where do we find the first pullback? How do we do that? We want to touch that midline. That's like our trigger, our setup. Once we have touched that midline, that's where we activate the confirmation method. We're going to enter long on the first confirmation of price trading above the previous bar's high. So we're going to continue to add this confirmation as long as we're above the buy-sell line and as long as all 3 Donchian channels are headed up. Let's say we finally enter, let's say price trades above the previous bar's high, we're going to place our stop below the lowest low of the pullback. So in other words, let's say we entered here, looking back in hindsight, where was the lowest low? Well, that's where we're going to place our stop. And this is going to be a discretionary thing. A lot of people will say if I'm trading on a daily bar, I like to place, half point on a stock, maybe even a full point. It's up to you. Just know that it should be somewhere in that vicinity. There's nothing, cut in stone where you have to do the same amount away from the low every time. So you've placed your stop below the lowest low of the pullback, and you're going to exit when price touches the highest Donchian channel. Okay, so if we have pullback in place, we got in on the confirmation, the trend has resumed, the train left the station, is going in our direction. Once it reaches that top Donchian channel, that's our exit point. You can either sell to market, you can have a limit in there, it doesn't have to be that complicated. It's up to you. Everyone have these copied down? Before we move on, I don't want to frighten you anymore. All right, so here's a picture of the spiders going all the way up to the middle of October, just a couple of weeks ago. All right, looking back in hindsight, sure, we've got, looks like an uptrend, but how could we have taken advantage looking back in hindsight? It's easy to look at now and say, yeah, I should have been long, but how would I have known what was actually taking place, what was actually happening? How could I have bought at these most opportune times right here on these pullbacks? It's easy for someone to come back in hindsight and say, well, yeah, that's where I would have bought. But while you're in the thick of the trade, while the market's moving, how do you know to get in at these most opportune times on the spiders? Step 1. Price must be above the 50-period simple moving average, and at the same time, all 3 Donchian channels must be headed in an upward direction. Okay? All right, so we have our chart of the spiders going up to a couple of weeks ago. Where's price in relation to the buy-sell line?
Could you go back to that last?
Sure.
Just for a second.
Right. Price must be above the 50-period simple moving average, and all 3 Donchian channels must be headed in an upward direction. Okay? All right, so let's add the buy-sell line. Obviously, we are above the buy-sell line. Now, at this point, it's a little shaky, 1 or 2 times above and below, but remember the rule is 2 or 3 consecutive closes above or below. Now, we only have 1 close below and no closes below here, so for all intents and purposes, we're still above the buy-sell line this entire time. Once we crossed over here, we remained above the buy-sell line. Okay, so that's the first part of that rule. Second part is all 3 Donchian channels must be headed in the same stair-step upward direction. And they are. See that? So we have concept number 1 fulfilled. We have confirmation that we're in an uptrend. We haven't done anything else yet except fulfill concept number 1. We're above the buy-sell line, and all 3 Donchian channels are headed in the same stair-step direction. Everyone see that? Any questions on that? Okay, so that's step number 1. Step number 2. We're going to look to buy now when the rising price bar, remember we're rising, we're in an uptrend, but when the rising price bar now begins to decline, that's our pullback, our little sell-off. People are getting out of the water. When the buyers are getting out of the water, they're selling. It begins to decline. It eventually touches the midline of that rising channel. Everyone got that? That's our step number 2. You've already written this down, but we're just taking it step by step. All right, so here's what we're looking for. The price bars are rising, and we're looking for them to sell off and touch the midline as they do right here. See that? Then the price rises again, and then it sells off and touches the midline. This is an actual chart. This happened just this last 3 or 4 months in the spiders. It rises again, sells off, touches the midline. Bars are rising, and we start to have a deeper pullback, but we eventually touch the midline. Rise again, sell off, touch the midline. Okay? So that's what we're looking for. That's our next step. We want to see the rising price bars, since we're in an uptrend, sell off and touch. They have to touch that midline. It doesn't have to close above or below. We're not concerned about where the close is. We're only concerned that we sell off and touch the midline. Any questions? Let's go to the next step, step 3. Once that has been concluded, we're going to trigger and apply the confirmation method. We're going to enter a long position on the first confirmation of price trading above the previous bar's high. Remember, that's our confirmation method. To go long, we have to trade 1 tick above the previous bar's high, a minimum of 1 tick. Some traders, members like to use 1 to 5 ticks. Once again, that's a discretionary call. This is making you part of the process. It's up to you. A lot of times people will say, 1 tick isn't enough, because a lot of time it's fake out. It goes up 1 tick and then comes right back down. Okay, well, then you're stopped out. It didn't work that time. So they want to place it maybe a little higher, maybe 5 ticks. This is all part of the process which you can apply yourself. As you see here, we touch the midline, and we start to, once we've touched that midline, that's where we apply the confirmation method, these green horizontal lines here. We will buy if we trade above, and ultimately we traded above right here. So this is where we entered right here, 1 to 5 ticks above on the spiders. We sold off here. Here's where we touch the midline. We apply the confirmation technique. We're only going to buy once we trade 1 tick above. Now we gapped open, so we bought it a little higher, but that's okay. We're still staying true to the technique. You can decide by looking at a pre-market opening whether you want to pay up or not. This is once again becoming part of the process. This is not a system. So if you don't want to buy the spiders up a half or point or so, then don't take the trade. See how this is different than a system? You can decide not to do it. You can always sit back. And a week later, you have another chance. Same exact scenario. We touch, but we gapped up again. So it's up to you whether you wanted to take that trade. 3 weeks later, we come down and touch. We apply our confirmation method. Gapped up just a little bit. Okay to get in, so we entered, and we went right back up again. And so on. You see how this is so much more conducive to being in sync with the market. This is not a cherry-picked example that was from 5 years ago. This happened up until the middle of October, and I'm going to show you how you could have traded with the results, because we all know that the market stopped going up. So this is your entry. That was the next step. That's where you enter using the confirmation. We went over all these in the very beginning of the presentation. Step number 4, how do we protect ourselves? Because it may not be right. Every trade's not a winner. We're going to place your protective stop below the lowest low of the pullback. So when you enter into the trade, look back and see where was the lowest low prior to your entry. That's where you place your stop, anywhere below that. So here are all our entries. Once you entered here, you place your stop right here below the lowest low. We enter here, place our stop right here, the lowest low. Enter here, place our stop. You see how it's not going to be the same difference. Sometimes you're going to have much wider stop, sometimes you'll have a very tight stop. Enter at this point, your stop is right here. Enter at this point, your stop is right here. So you can know in advance if you want to take the trade based off of how much you're risking. A lot of people were asking me about risk, saying like, well, you know, we have to make the decision whether it's worth the risk. Well, you know in advance with all these trades, you know in advance where they're going to open up, if it's going to be unchanged, a pre-market opening if you're trading stocks, where the risk is going to be. If there's too much risk trading daily stocks, go down to an hourly time frame. You see a lot of examples in hourly bars. Go down to a 5-minute time frame. Yes?
I'm not familiar that much with non-chain channels, but do you know prior to taking a trade, do you know the target, the reward?
Yeah, you do, but it's rather subjective because it's that's the next. I'll share with you in the next. That's the next. That's why I say sometimes wait till the very end of the presentation, because it's going to be explained in this very next exit. Step number 5. You're going to exit when price touches the highest Donchian channel. So you'll know in advance where your exit is going to be, but only fairly new, because the Donchian channels and the way we use them are dynamic. In other words, the indicator is always changing. It can go lower, it can go higher, so you may not exit at exactly the same point. It may change while you're in the trade. Therefore, you have a rough idea of where you'll exit. Once you become a member of Specialist Trading, we teach you ways, though. If you enter and you say, well, I'm entering here, I'm risking 1 point, I'd like to make at least 2 for 1. If I exit at the high, it comes out to 1-to-1 risk-reward ratio. That's not good enough for me. But say you feel strongly about the trade. We teach you ways in which to stay in the trade longer so that you will exit with a 2-to-1 ratio. It's up to you. If you want to trade it in the most standard generic way, this is the way. You just wait for it to touch the top line and then you get out. Okay? So once you're in the trade, you've placed your stop, you're simply going to wait for it to touch the top line. And you see so many times how we'll touch the line and then that's it. You come back and it's over. So we would have exited, whoops, went backwards. We would have exited right here. Another trade comes in, we enter right here, touch the top line, exited right here. Sell off again, enter, exit right here. Now at this point, these past trades, it was a perfect exit. And this is where you want to get out, even though the risk-reward ratio may have not been that well, maybe only 1-to-1 or 1.5-to-1, but it was the right place to get out. See, we're more than trying to worry about stats and statistics, we're trying to just do what's right. So we exited right here. Now in this particular example, it kept going higher. So what we tell a lot of students so many times is to trade multiple contracts and to exit, or multiple shares. If you trade 200 shares, sell half of your position right here and let the rest run. Now in these scenarios, it wouldn't have worked out. But in this scenario, you would have sold half your position and look, you would have had all these profits you could have held on to. We have another entry right here. We have our stop. And when we touch this Donchian channel, we exit again. You see, we're just trying to accumulate singles. Every once in a while, you'll get a nice home run. We're not worried about that. Remember, the brighter the sunshine, darker the shadow. You can have a ton of home runs, and then the rules that got you that home run don't work anymore, and you just get wiped out. Finally, we had our last entry here. And did we ever get up to that point? For the first 4 trades, going back to the end of July, beginning of August, nearly 10 points in the spiders. You could have, if you wanted to, we're not a option class per se, or option course, but you could have applied options if you wanted to. If you wanted to, you could have actually bought the stock. If you wanted to transfer it over into trading the E-minis, you could have transferred over the signals and bought the E-minis. You know, it's up to you how you wanted to trade it. You're part of the process. But you see how simple? You're trading with the trend, concept number 1, and you're buying pullbacks. All without the help of listening to some trading guru or being in some trading room. It's right there in front of you. All right, these are the rules for sell. They're basically the same thing. We just turn everything upside down. So if you want to copy them, feel free to, but they are no different than going long. You just turn everything upside down. We have to find concept number 1. We have to find the trend. How are we going to do that? Price must now be below the 50-period simple moving average, and now all 3 Donchian channels must be headed in the same downward direction. Okay? So this tells us concept number 1 is fulfilled. We have a trend to the downside. Now that we've found the trend, we initiate concept number 2. We trade on pullbacks. So how are we going to find that pullback zone? We're going to look to sell, go short, when the declining price bar, because price is declining, now starts to rise. This is the pullback. These are the sellers have gotten out of the pool, and this is when you want to jump in on the pullback. When the price bar begins to rise and eventually touches the midline of the Donchian channel. This is our setup of our trigger to enter. So rule number 3 is we're going to enter short on the first confirmation of price now trading below the previous bar. Once we enter, we're going to place our protective stop above the highest high of the pullback. So after our entry, we're going to look back and see what the highest high was. That's where we'll place our stop. And now, before we exited at the highest Donchian channel, since we're short now, we're going to buy to cover at the lowest Donchian channel. Okay? Same rules, we just flipped them upside down. That's all we did. Any questions before we show some examples? Okay, let's go take it step by step. And we're also going to show you how this transfers over into different markets. Price must be below the 50 period, the buy-sell line, and all three Donchian channels must be headed in a downward direction. This is a weekly chart of the euro dollar. A lot of people said, well, you know, I like to trade longer term. You can use these same signals, just go to a weekly or even a monthly bar if you like. As you see here, price is below the 50 period simple moving average, and all three Donchian channels up to this point are headed in the same stair-step direction. They're not all in sync. Remember, they're not going to all be going down at the same time, but if something goes sideways, it's just pausing from a higher level earlier. So we're still in a downward direction. And all three Donchian channels must be headed in the same direction, as you see. So we have the two things fulfilled. We have concept number one, where we have the trend. Now we go to concept number two. Look to sell when the declining price bar, because we're in a downtrend, now starts to rally and eventually touches that midline. Okay? This is our setup bar. All right? You see the euro dollar now starts to bounce. It starts to rally. And here we touch the midline. Now this is a weekly bar of a totally different market. It's following the same concept, the same rules. This is our setup bar. This is where we're going to look now to go short. This is the environment. This is the zone where we want to start looking to go short. Step number three, how do we get in? We're going to short on the first confirmation of price trading below the previous bar's low. In this case, it's pips, 1 to 3 pips below. Okay, so here's the bar, the setup bar where we touch the midline. We want to go short if we trade below here. All right? So we get the next weekly bar. We never traded below, but we're still below the 50 period. All Donchian channels are still headed lower, so the signal is still valid. So we continue to track it, and now this is the bar we're waiting to go short. Obviously, we're going to get a better price because the signal is still valid if we happen to get in. So we now move our entry point up to here, and guess what? The very next bar we entered at 94.85. We're short the euro on a weekly basis. So this was going back to July. Step 4, once we're in, place your protective stop above the highest high of the pullback. So whenever you got in, look back at the chart and say, where was the highest high prior to my entry? That's where you place your stop. So once we got in here, where was the highest high? It was right here. So this is the last short-term high. So this is our stop placement right here. So we entered here. We placed our stop here. If we're able to exit at this point, it looks like a 2-to-1 risk-reward ratio. So it looks like a pretty good trade here. So buy to cover when price touches the lowest Donchian channel. So let's take it step by step. We're in the trade. We continue to keep our stop here. Here's where we entered. And we can either have a limit, or if we just want to be in front of our chart all day, we can watch it and wait to see if we ever touch here. Remember, these are weekly bars, totally different from watching daily bars of stock. This is a euro dollar. But over the course of the next couple of months, we ultimately got down there. And once we touched, you could simply buy at the market, or if you had a limit in there and you exited at 88.45, 640 pips, or trading one lot, that's $6,400. Okay, just one lot. Very simple. No conflict going on, no sitting going, oh my gosh, I don't know how much longer I can be in this trade, it's going against me. You use the confirmation method, it got you in, and you didn't have to sit through it going against you too much. Simple and easy, able to sleep at night. Very basic. Totally different market, totally different time frame, totally different direction. All right, so let's look at some current examples. Most of these are up until this last month. Once again, we're not trying to cherry pick things that worked great 5 years ago. These are starting with stocks, okay, to show you how well this technique works with stocks. This is WIN going up into the last 3 weeks of October. Where was price in relation to the buy-sell line? Above, right? And all three Donchian channels were headed in the same stair-step direction. So at this point, you know, you could look back in hindsight and say, well, that's easy, Steve. Yeah, you could see that was a great place to buy. But we didn't know that. We didn't know that it was going to go back up. We were just, at this point, watching the sell-off. Once we touch that midline, we apply the confirmation method. And there's where we entered at 101.15. And about a week or so later, we make nearly 9 points. Okay? Continues to rise, to go sideways, comes back down lower, touches the midline. We apply our confirmation method. We enter here in the middle of October. exited at the top daunting channel for nearly 4.5 points. Any questions? Simple enough? How about JCPenney to the downside? I particularly use this. This is an inexpensive, a cheaper stock, but just to show you that you can work on high flyers and you can work on $20, $30 stocks as well. Where is price in relation to the buy-sell line? We're below. Which direction are the daunting channels headed? Lower. So we're only going to short. I don't care what anyone says. I don't care what any indicator, what any chat room says, what any trading guru says. You're not going to buy. We're only going to look to short JCPenney. So we wait for the declining bars to start to rally, and once they touch the midline, we apply our confirmation. You see how we never would have gotten in until right here at 35.93. Even though it's not shown, we would have placed our stop up here, and then we just simply wait a week later, and we make a quick nearly 3.5 points. You see how beautiful the confirmation method is once we got in, the trend was in our direction. Yes, sir?
Those channels are flat, though. You consider that still down?
Remember what we said, flat only means that there's a pause in the direction. Where was it coming from? It was coming from a higher direction, right? So that all it means is just a pause in a downtrend. Now the pause could be a long pause, but it's still coming, the chart didn't go back further enough, but this was coming from a higher level. So it doesn't matter as long as, look at where the previous little slant was. Yes?
So just in this example, for example, if the 2 bars back from the interbar, that close was above 50-day simple moving average.
No, right here?
Well, if let's say if the close
Oh,
was
if it was.
above 50,
Where would your entry be if we,
would you go short?
well, let's answer the question. Where would your entry be?
Well,
Down here, right? You'd sell 1 tick below, right?
yeah,
Is that below the moving average?
yes.
That's your answer then. As long as you enter, I'm only saying that to make a point because this is always brought up to me about beginning students. They say the same thing. They say, but Steve, we closed above. Why did you go short? Or we closed below. Why did you go long? The basic rule is your entry. If you're looking for a short setup, and even though price may be oscillating above and below, as long as your entry is below the buy-sell line, it's okay. Now, granted, it's more opportune if everything is way below the buy-sell line. But nothing is cut and dry like that all the time. So that's a very good question. Sometimes you'll have closes above, but you're not going to go short above the buy-sell line. You're going to enter only if it trades below. Now let's say price kept going higher here, kept going higher and higher and higher and higher, and then finally it traded below, but your entry would be above. You wouldn't take that trade. Okay? So a very good question. Yes, sir.
Do you ever move your stops in your favor?
Yes, you do, and that's part of our advanced course. That comes with membership. But yes, we do. But I'll show you a technique later on today. I'm giving you one of those examples. But we have, I believe, 7 different ways for entering stops, from conservative to aggressive to trailing, and I'm sharing with you just a couple today.
Do you use break-even stops too? Yes.
If you wait a couple more minutes, you'll find out. Yeah, we do. Okay. I want to take particular example to this next setup here. So we're still, we just made 3.5 points roughly. It's a nice trade. A couple of weeks later, we're still looking to get short again. I mean, I know a lot of traders like to stick with the same stock sometimes. So if your JCPenney is in your portfolio, you're still watching it because there's no reason to go long. And lo and behold, we start to bounce again. Even though we have this nice sideways action, there's still just pauses from coming from a higher play. So it's still downtrend and we're still below the buy-sell line. Now guess what? We touched here again. Now this is a valid entry to go short once we traded below right here, 33.05. Now I personally would not have taken this trade because, as the gentleman was pointing about risk, you would have entered here and your stop would have been somewhere here and you only would have been exiting down here. So you're trying to make a little to risk a lot. So it's not a very high probability trade or something, a nice risk-reward ratio. But I make this point once again to show how important it is to implement trading with the trend. Because someone here could have said, that's not a very good trade, I'm not going to take it. Or someone would have said, maybe I am going to take it. Regardless of what you did, you would have covered right here. Maybe you placed a limit, maybe you're waiting the next day for it to trade there. But look what happened the very next day. Okay? Because you're with the sync with the trend, because you're not trying to pick a bottom or a top, Had you stayed in and placed a limit or purchased on the opening, you would have had nearly a 4 and 3 or a 5-point gain. This is why, even when news comes out, I have nothing to quantify this, and there's no statistics to back this, but the buy-sell line, when there's bad news, it's been my experience that more often than not, the gaps will go in sync with the buy-sell line. Just as you saw in JP Morgan, when that terrible news came out, it had already been below the buy-sell line for weeks. Just when you saw the market fell out of bed in the crash, we had already been below the buy-sell line for 3 weeks. Just in this case, in JCPenney, probably on some bad earnings or something, who knows? We were well below the buy-sell line for months. So if you're frightened about news coming out, most of the time, the news is already accounted into the trade. Most of the big players, the smart money, knows that there's going to be bad news down the road, and they're slowly, the sellers, dragging the price down. Same thing with the price going up. Many times you'll see a gap to the upside. Guys will go, boy, I was short and I got killed. Where was price in relation to the buy-sell line? Well, for the past month, we were above the buy-sell line. So you never would have got killed. You actually would have probably made a great deal of money being long. So I just want to show you how the buy-sell line really helps, how important this is. Okay, weekly chart of Apple. Okay, this was going into the end of October. All right? Now, if you're trading Apple as an investor, look how many points you could have made going back to the beginning of 2012. Okay? We're above the buy-sell line on a weekly basis. All the Donchian channels are headed upwards. We sell off, we touch the midline, use the same, it doesn't matter whether we're trading a weekly bar or a 5-minute bar, use the same rules, keep it simple, enter on confirmation that we trade 1 to 5 ticks above the previous bar, and then just simply exit here. Quick 48, 49 points. Now, had you want to stay in this, if you really felt committed that Apple was going much, much higher, we teach you ways in which to stay into the trade. But had you not, you would have waited to sometime in June for another sell-off. We traded right here, we touched the midline, enter 567.52, and in August you would have exited again for 76.5 points on a weekly chart of Apple. Now guess what? Look where we are. We would have had a false start right here. In actuality, had you used the same method, you would have entered here and been stopped out. But we're still above the buy-sell line, and the Donchian channels are still going higher. So if we wanted to continue trading Apple on a weekly basis, you could actually place an order up here. Who knows what the market's going to do? We have no idea. Now, right now it looks terrible, but this is still flashing a setup to go long. We're not concerned, remember, with outside sources. Those are the things that get in our way. We're just listening to the market. And right now, on a weekly basis, the market in Apple is telling us that we're setting up for a long signal. So you can track that on your own, seeing if it holds up. Now, pay particular attention to this sell-off we've had. Say, well, Apple is a little bit too rich for my blood. I can't trade this stock. It's, $700 stock. I can't. Well, go down to a 50-minute time frame. If we look back on this sell-off period, if we look back here, well, on a 15-minute time frame, we were below the buy-sell line. This is why I only trade personally to the time frame that the chart I'm looking at, because someone looking at a higher time frame could say, well, Apple on a daily basis is above the buy-sell line, so I'm not going to go short. Well, you would have missed all these great setups right here, 20 points in Apple in a couple of days. So I only like to trade indicators based off of that current chart. I don't use a higher time frame to validate a lower one. Okay? If that works for you, that's fine. You're not going outside the rules. You're just adding an extra a point to it to filter trades. But as we see here on this 15-minute chart, where is price in relation to the buy-sell line? Price is well below. We have all three Donchian channels headed lower. We bounce up and touch the midline. That's where we begin to use the confirmation method. We entered here. We would have placed our stop up here. And in a half an hour, we made a quick 4 points. We come down lower. We bounce back up again. We start using the confirmation method. Here's where we would have entered. 606.32. Our stop is up here. And guess what? If we held the position overnight, we would have made 15 points. Okay, those are stocks. Let's look at the E-mini S&P. A lot of day traders like to day trade. Now we're going to be looking not only at daily bars, we're going to be looking at tick bars. Look at all the signals here going back in the past couple of weeks here in the E-mini on a 1,000 tick bar chart. Okay? Same concept. It gets kind of cluttered here, but it's the same concept. So we don't have to really go in detail. You can see the same concept. we touch the midline, we apply confirmation, and we have these nice little scenarios where we take these nice little nuggets out of the market. Obviously our stops, I just didn't want to clutter up the page that much. Our stops would be below at these low pullbacks here. This is going long when the market was trending on a 1,000 tick bar chart. If you're trading to the downside on a 10-minute chart, you're going to have some larger gains because the time frame is spreading out a little bit, but we're still below the buy-sell line. We're still looking at the same concept where the trend is down, our Donchian channels. We look for a bounce. The minute we touch the midline, we apply the confirmation method, enter, and exit. Enter, exit, enter, exit. So roughly about over 10 points, 11 points in a couple of days, trading the E-mini. Now, we can also apply this to a monthly chart, okay? Now, the further out in time frame you go, obviously you're going to have the less signals. But let's say we want to trade the E-mini on a monthly basis. I'm sure most of us would be holding contracts that long. But just to show you how this concept works, any time frame, had you been looking at the E-mini, the S&P 500 in a monthly time frame, the 3 Donchian channels are headed higher. We're above the buy-sell line. Even though we closed below, our entry would have been above. So once we touched here, we use the confirmation method, entered at 1198, 3 or 4 months later, exit with nearly 140 points. One trade in the last year, okay? Same concept. How about the Forex markets? Here's a Euro-Yen daily chart. This was a little choppier. Didn't head up right to the exit signal right away, but the same concept. We're above the buy-sell line. The Donchian channels are headed higher. Once we touch, we use the confirmation method, and we just hold on until we reach the top point. Weekly chart of the euro-dollar, same thing. We're below the buy-sell line. Here's where I think you were asking about earlier, sir, where you said we close above. At this point, we did close above the buy-sell line, but look where our entry was, below. So this is a valid signal to go short. You would go short, cover 831 pips, short, cover 562 pips. So we're talking about $13,000 here in a matter of weeks. Now here's one thing that's interesting. This is from August all the way up to this past month. So we're setting up in the euro-dollar to go short on a weekly basis. So this is where, if you're trading the euro on a weekly chart, you would have entered to go short, and you would be short right now at 29.17. So I invite you to follow along in this trade. I didn't personally trade it. I don't trade the Forex markets on a weekly basis, but we have a lot of members that do. And you would actually be short the euro at this point. Your stop would be right here, but that's a pretty good risk-reward ratio. You'd be looking to cover down here. Yes?
So what if you miss the entry and then a few days later you find out that you should be short, now you have a better price?
It's up to you.
Stop is still valid. Stop is still valid.
Well, the trade's still valid. If you would not miss the entry, you'd be in the trade, right? So you can use that logic to say, might as well get in now, I got a better price. I know a lot of traders like to trade that way. They'll wait and they go, gosh, I could get in better. A lot of traders, such as myself, it's just a personal thing. I feel like I don't have the same mindset I had when I entered it. So I feel like I'm not in the same mindset or the same frame of mind, so I won't jump back in again. I'll just move on to the next one. But there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. Yeah, because in this example right here, had you entered, you would have been entering right here. And on the next day, say you missed it, you were out of town, or you didn't have your computer or something, you could have shorted it higher, got a better price, stopped your rise at the same place. Yes?
Even though you're staying above the 50 now?
Remember that same question. Even though price can close, where is your entry? Entry would have been below the 50 period simple moving. So as long as your entry is below, it's still valid. It's not the best of scenarios, but it's still valid. The best of scenarios is something like right here. You know, you're well below, and it's a nice quick entry. So this could be having some type of high-level consolidation, and we could have a flag getting ready to go higher, but we don't know yet. So it's up to you. In this scenario right here, we closed well above the 50, but we entered below, and this worked out fine. Once again, it's a numbers game. This all comes with your experience, with your insight. This is the discretion I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, well, I saw so-and-so come out and talk about the global economy, and I think I'm going to go long the euro, go short there. And that's a hunch. What I'm talking about is, well, we have a close above the buy-sell line, which isn't the best of things, but my entry would still be below. My past experience, is this a high probability trade or not? This is the type of insight I'm talking about. And what you brought up is very good. So it's up to you to decide. Okay, now let's talk about a conservative version. People are talking about moving your stops. People are talking about, how to take advantage of this. The risk-reward ratio may not be that conducive to actually getting into the trade. This is another way to trade this. If you want to cut down on your risk, and I'm not going to be, sitting up here and telling you that every trade works out great. There are a number of times where it doesn't work, and you get stopped out with a loss, and then sometimes you may go into a drawdown. Here is a great way to protect yourself using this conservative version. Now, with this conservative version, you may be stopped out a lot of times, and you may take some small little gains, but you're going to protect your capital. That's why it's conservative. And we're going to use a 200% range extension. This is our conservative money management exit. It's a 200% range extension. Does anyone know what a range extension is, or are they familiar with that? I'm going to explain it, so don't worry. Okay, it's very simple. It may sound complicated, but it's a range extension of the setup bar. And remember, the setup bar is the bar prior to entry. So if here's our setup bar and we went one tick above, we entered on this bar. So the bar prior to it is always the setup bar, okay? Because this 200% range extension is based off of the setup bar. It'll make more sense when I show you a chart such as this. Here's a 30-minute chart of the E-mini. We're well above the buy-sell line. So this is a perfect example of it's okay to go long. And the Donchian channels, even though we have this kind of sideways movement, they're all headed in a stair-step upward. So all the rules have been met for the concept. We have up direction. We want to buy in a pullback, so we wait for price to sell off. Once it touches this midline, we apply the confirmation method. We don't buy at the market. We don't place a limit. We only buy once we see the train leaving in our direction. That's why trading 1-2 ticks above the setup bar is high. This is the setup. Okay, so the very next bar, we entered. Okay, so we're along at 1361. Things are going great. We're getting real close to our exit point. We've got about 7 points locked in. It's a nice gain. We're feeling great about this trade, right? We're just about maybe a point away. We're thinking about how we're going to spend the money. We're thinking I'll buy my wife a present, maybe some earrings. We'll go out to dinner. I'll go on that trip, and then put the exit order in there. And lo and behold, never gets there. You're like, well, it's going to come back. It's going to come back. I have faith. Steve said to rely on your strategy. I have faith. It's going to come back. And then lo and behold, gaps down. And so what looked like you were made in the shade, you had a 7-point profit, looked like it was going to be an 8-9 point gain, turns out to a 12.5 point loss because you would have exited on the opening of that downward opening. Okay? Happens sometimes. It's just price is doing business. How can we protect ourselves in scenarios like this? We're going to use our conservative version. We're right back to where we started. We're going to enter, we're going to follow the same exact rules. Nothing has changed. Concept number 1, buy-sell line, Donchian channels, we're still entering the exact same way, but we're going to pay particular attention to this bar, the setup bar, okay? Remember, if you're having trouble with setup bar, it's always the bar prior to entry. So when we use our confirmation method, we entered when we traded 1 tick above the setup bar. That's where we entered. So this is the setup bar right here. We're going to measure the range of that setup bar, whatever it is. And this doesn't just apply to the E-mini, it applies to stocks or Forex market. So measure from top to bottom what the range is. That's 100%. And all we're going to do is simply take that amount, and since we're long, we're going to add it. This comes up, and this gives us the 200% range extension. We've extended the range another 100%, equaling 200%. Everyone understand that? That's our 200% range extension. It's at this point right here where you can decide either take profits and say, I'm not going to wait for the top Donchian channel. I'm going to get out. I'm going to take a quick gain. That's okay. I'm not worried about being in for the long haul. I just want to take these quick singles like Steve said. So you can either do that, or if you're trading multiple contracts or multiple shares, you'll take half your position or a third of it, whatever you want, off the table. You'll sell some right there. Okay? You can exit part of your position. You can leave your stop right here because you've exited part of your position. Or if you want, you can move your stop to unchanged. In other words, break-even stop, which you had suggested earlier, sir. So you can either sell something and move the remainder of your position to break even, or say, I don't want to sell anything, I think this thing's really going to go up. At the very worst, I'll just break even. So you don't sell anything, you just move your stop to break even. Either way, you have used the 200% range extension once again to become part of the process. You're not sitting there waiting for the news to come out or waiting what's going to happen with the economy. You are part of the process. This is what we're talking about. You're using your 30% discretion to decide, I want to trade a little bit more conservatively here. Okay? This is what we're talking about. This is what makes you part of the game. You're no longer taking yourself out. You're in the game. So you can decide to be more conservative by figuring out this range extension. Once we get up there, move your stop to unchanged, take a little off the table, or you can sell your position entirely out and say, that's it, I'm out. I'm just leaving the table. I just want to take a little bit. Okay? Now, had you done that, let's say you had sold half of your position here. Okay? So you made basically about 4 points. That's not bad. The remaining portion of your position is right here at break even, and you have your limit to sell the remaining portion right here. But it never gets there, so you're stopped out, break even. So on half your position, you made roughly about 4 points. On the other half, you broke even. Okay? Not bad, but guess what? You sidestepped this entirely. You missed the loss. So this is the way we trade conservatively. Here's another example, 4-hour chart of the Swiss franc. Okay? We're below the buy-sell line. All lines are going lower, the Donchian channels. We get up here, we go short. Here's our bar that we entered. We measure the range of this bar, and then we simply subtract it now. This is our range extension because we're short. It's at this point we can either sell part of or cover part of our position, cover the entire position, or we can just say, I'll move my stop to unchanged. Okay? So this is the point. Say you had exited part of your position. All right? You'd simply now move your stop to unchanged, and you would have been stopped out right there. But guess what? We would have never gotten down to the place where you wanted to exit. The trade would have been a loser. So by applying this conservative version, you would have either made a little money, or at the very worst, you would have broken even. How about that spider chart? Remember I told you about the end of October where we had the little question mark? Here is a perfect example of how using the conservative method could have kept you out of this rather nice sell-off we've had as of late. It was a valid signal to go long in the spiders in the beginning of October. You would have entered at 144.12. Okay? Place your stop just below. If we're conservative, we want to measure the range of the setup bar. That's prior to entry, and then add the range. And this is where we are either going to exit our entire position, or we would maybe exit part of it, or we would, at the very least, move our stop to break even. Okay? So let's say we exited part of it. Well, we would have made maybe a point. Okay? We would have moved our stop to break even, and we would have got stopped out on the balance of our position. But guess what? Things would have looked good, and right now you're kicking yourself. I'm sure you're probably kicking your computer saying, oh gosh, why did Steve tell me about that? Now this thing's going to go straight up. Why did I get out? I wish I hadn't learned about this conservative version. Well, maybe not. Because you would have eventually got stopped out with a loss, and we all know what's happened in the last couple of weeks in the spiders and in the market. All right, so let's review. Strategy number one, it's a trend following strategy. We all see that, okay? We're following the concepts number 1 and 2. We're looking for the trend, and we're looking to buy pullbacks in the trend. How do we do that? Prices above the 50 period, and all 3 Donchian channels are headed higher. Okay? If we're going long. If we're going short, prices below the Donchian channel, the 50 period, and all 3 Donchian channels are headed lower. This works in any time frame, in any market, as I just showed you. Standard and conservative versions, I would suggest using the conservative version while you're paper trading. Do not apply any capital to this. It's going to take a lot more time and effort to really get to feel for this strategy. It's designed to trade moderate pullbacks, but there is a level of consistency. The specialist edge, remember, is about hitting singles. If you're more concerned with protecting your capital, use that conservative version and just take that 200% range extension as your exit or a point to move your stop to unchanged. You'll get stopped out unchanged a lot, but you'll preserve your capital in the beginning. Remember, all my strategies are designed to be as simple as possible. You saw there we had 5 rules. That was it. You saw how well that worked with current charts. Okay? There are now, because the market, most of the equities and futures are below the buy-sell line, we don't have enough data to form any type of strategy number 1 trades because it's more of a pullback, swing trading. But if we continue to go lower and we bounce up a little bit, you're going to get some really, really nice strategy number one setups to go short, because we'll most likely be in a downtrend. We'll get a little bounce up to that median line. You can apply the confirmation method to the Donchian channels. Okay? You see how simple it is. Remember, anyone in the world can complicate a strategy. Anyone. It does not take a lot of character to do that. You can make your strategy as complicated as possible. You can have 30, 50 rules. It's the easiest in the world to do that. It's difficult to simplify things. So where a system will keep out that noise at bay, it also keeps out the most important thing, which is you. So we want to have that 30% of your input. Okay? That's how you get to this consistency in the market, which is about hitting singles. And remember, become a part of the process. If you decide to become a member of Specialist Trading and want to trade one of our strategies, we'll teach you how to become a member of the process, a part of the process. If you decide to continue trading what you're currently trading and someone else's, that's fine. But try to incorporate these techniques and these different categories to elevate your trading to the next level. Okay? If I can leave you with one thing today, it's simplicity equals consistency. You know, my friend Pat here, who's a specialist on the floor, a great trader, he will tell you that same thing. He was telling me now that he has some methodologies where he has no indicators at all, just looking at the chart. He's been trading for years, and we all go through the same tests, we all go through the same type of rigmarole where, you know, we'll go through slumps, we'll go through great trades, but it's the consistency that adds to our longevity. I want you all to be trading 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road. I don't want you to join that 80% group, which I talked about in the beginning, where you give away everything you saved and you can no longer trade because you're wiped out. Remember, it doesn't matter if you have years in experience. You can easily become a part of that 80% group. I could. If I threw everything out the window, I could just as easily lose everything. So it's something you have to constantly watch, something that you have to constantly apply and implement. The point is that most people don't want to do that. Remember, you want to stay thin and lose weight, eat healthy and exercise, but most people don't want to do that. Same with trading. You want to be consistent and trade 20, 30 years down the road. Keep things as simple as possible. My goal is to teach you. We're an educational site. We're not just a signal firing site where you just follow the signals blindly. So if you decide to become a member, I'm going to teach you everything that I've accumulated in 35 years and really shorten your learning curve so that you'll be able to use the same techniques and methods that I do. Now, as a free gift to all of you for attending, I want to offer you our advanced trading lessons for free. I'm going to pass around a sign-up sheet where you can give me your email address, and we have a total of, I believe, 6 or 7 volumes now of weekly webinars that I put out for my members. And we've created a series on this where they're anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes long, where I go over different scenarios and different tips and techniques weekly that will elevate your trading, different things I've learned, different things I've seen in current markets. And people really love these. And now we're selling these, but for all of you for attending today, if you want, we will give you the first, I believe, our first volume free. This is online access to, I believe, 10 videos, but this is for a limited time only. So sign up, and Brett, my associate, will give you all the login, and you can go watch those 10 videos free with more information and different tips and techniques the way I share with you today. And if you're really interested about becoming a member, for all of you, we're offering a 50% off coupon for any strategy or course. Okay? So we have a number of strategies. You can purchase an individual strategy like strategy number 1. We sell strategy number 1, and I've given you most of the information, but there's still tons more ways to trade it that comes with the course. We also have strategies just for the Forex, strategies just for the E-mini. These all come with immediate access, entries, exits, and stops. We tell you about weekly webinars where we give different information, and my personal email address, so you can contact me whenever you'd like, and I'll answer any question. This also includes 1-year trade signals, but remember, that's so you can confirm whether you are understanding the information right or not. This is for a very limited time only, so if you want to take advantage of that, I urge you to contact us. And here's where you would sign up for any of those. If you want to sign up for the free volume of online courses, you can do that. I'll pass this around, but if you have questions about becoming a member or becoming a student with one of the strategies, you can contact Brett Marsh, our VP of Operations, at brettm@specialisttrading.com, or call us directly at 310-844-7220. This brings us to the end of the presentation. I thank you so much. If we want any more questions and answers, I'm here for you to take anything you'd like. Yes, sir.
What's your universe that you scan? What do you stocks or futures, whatever?
question was, what's the universal scan I have for looking for this? You're not going to believe this, but believe it or not, I'm old school. I actually look through each individual chart. And what I do is, excuse me, I'm losing my voice from talking. I haven't spoken in a long time. What I do is, I have 3 individual charts on my, broken up to on my one page. One with Donchian channels, others with other indicators that we use for other strategies. And I just go down the S&P 500 nightly. I know a lot of people say that's nuts, but I've become so accustomed to this that it just literally takes me maybe half an hour. And I can just see by sight, there's a setup, there's a setup, there's not a setup. I think you do the same thing, don't you? Because you've been trading long enough, this is the process we're talking about. If you become part of the process, you know whether there's a setup or there's not. Now, having said that, I believe if you contact Brett, we do have a scanner for a TradeStation, but it's for an individual strategy. And I believe that's strategy number 4, an entirely different strategy. That's probably one of our best strategies for trading. But I'm sorry, not a big, I'm probably sure we should have some type of scanning, but I think, once again, there's a danger of relying too much on that crutch, and I would rather you find them in the beginning for yourself.
You don't have any favorites, you just go through the whole lesson?
I go through the whole entire S&P. Yeah. And that's how I come up with signals. And then there are literally tens, hundreds of signals each night. I choose the best ones for my members that I think have the highest probability for success, and I post them. Okay. Any other questions? While you still have me. Actually, once again, so many times I've spoken or given webinars, and people say, oh gosh, I have a question, but it's concluded already. Here's the information. Write down our phone number or email address. You can always contact us. Even if you're not interested in becoming a member, but you just have a question about the Donchian channels or something, you can always contact us, and we'll get back to you. Okay? Going once, going twice? Yes, sir.
Signals that you're talking about that you review in the evening?
Well, for our stock courses, we have upwards of 6 strategies. I go through the entire S&P 500 every night and post what I think are the best. There are usually only 3 or 4 specific strategies, but I post the best ones that I feel for those for the S&P 500. Okay, and I give those to our members. But remember, they're more used for a learning tool, so that you understand what's happening, as opposed to, I don't want you to just say, well, Steve says go long AEP. Okay, I'll buy it. You have no reason why. You just take the signals. I don't want you to do that. I want you to learn the process. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, the videos and your book, do they kind of go hand in hand?
I'm sorry.
Do you have a book on your website?
Yeah, we have a book, right? Unfortunately, we're going to stop selling that book because we've had such a run on it. At the same time, we're only going to give it to members who sign up for courses because we only have so many books. But the books carry the strategies, but they're just 3 strategies, but they're very basic and very generic. I've given you more information here today than what's in the book. And then the courses, when you become a member, even take it up an even higher level, give you tons more information. So the book was just very, very generic.
So we should start with these videos.
The videos will help, but the videos don't go so much into strategy. They're just tips and techniques, like I explained in the first portion. Yeah, that you can apply to any strategy you want to have. All right. Yes, sir.
So when you mention your courses, there are 4 specific parts of the market. E-minis, the Forex.
Right. You can decide what you like to trade. Do you have a particular market you focus on?
Futures.
Okay. Let's say you like futures, the E-mini, the mini Russell. You can either pick an individual futures course by talking to Brett. He'll give you an idea and talk with you what you're looking for, or you can buy the entire suite and buy a course where you can have upwards of close to 10 strategies, and then pick and choose. And you can apply that 50% discount to any of those. Okay. Anything else? Any questions? Going once, going twice? Oh, I'm sorry. Here's the sign-up sheet. I will pass that out immediately after I thank you all for attending today. Once again, thank you so much. Look forward to coming back. Thank you, Ron, for inviting me.